Chapter 620. War in Winter. When Feng Shui heard this news, he almost thought that there was something wrong with his ears and that he had heard wrongly. He asked Feng Jin in private, "It's the middle of winter now and the new year is approaching." "It's a bit." Feng Gui swallowed the words he was about to say, but Feng Jin already understood what his elder brother was trying to convey. Feng Jin heaved a long sigh and said helplessly, "The emperor has issued an edict for the world to come to his aid. My lord, as a subject, naturally can't disobey the edict. But if we obey the order to rescue the emperor, all of the lord's previous efforts will be wasted. If we don't get rid of the Red Lotus group, it will be difficult for the people of Wanzhou to live in peace. In order to get the best of both worlds, we have no choice but to start the war now. We want to end the war as soon as possible and send troops to Qinzhou to respond to the imperial edict." Even in front of his elder brother, Feng Jin still managed to put on a good show. Jiang Pingji chose to start the war in winter not for her own selfish desires, nor was it to expand her territory. She did it for the good of the people of Wanzhou. She had a sincere patriotic heart. She was an important, good and virtuous minister that was hard to find in Dongqing. As for the truth, well, it was fine as long as the brothers knew it in their hearts. Feng Gui's lips curled into a faint smile with a hint of mockery in his voice. Rescue the emperor. For the royal family of Dongqing, regardless of whether they succeeded or failed, the final outcome could not change the fact that they were about to perish. How could a dynasty that was rotten to the core continue? It was unknown whether this rescue would allow the royal family to struggle at death's door or hasten their death. Feng Jin furrowed his brows with a thoughtful look on his face. My lord had no other choice this time. If not for the interference of the rescue mission, my lord would have followed the plan to recover Qingde County after the spring plowing. Now I can only bring the time forward and give it a try. Feng Guo lowered his gaze for a moment before he probed, "Huaiyu, how confident is Lu Lanting in this battle?" If she won, Jiang Pingji, whose power had expanded once again, would be able to deal with the local aristocrats in Shangyang County and completely control Wanzhou. If she lost, then the local gentry clans of Shangyang County would probably cause her some trouble. People strive for higher places and water flows to lower places. The noble families could last for hundreds or even thousands of years not only because of their good family traditions, but also because they had to make precise investments and pick sides. If the gentry could not see the future, Jiang Pingji would have to be careful of the knives in the dark. I don't dare to say 100%, but at least 90%. Feng Jin flicked his sleeve with one hand and brewed tea with the other. The two brothers sat opposite each other in front of the window, brewing tea and wine as they talked about political affairs. Although this incident happened suddenly, the Lord has always liked to make early preparations. This year's autumn harvest was pretty good, and the granary was already full of food. The army's provisions were plentiful, the horses were strong and healthy, and the soldiers were well trained, so their resistance to the cold was extremely strong. In comparison, the Red Lotus group is a motley crew that can't even be shown in public. With such a great disparity, as long as my lord doesn't destroy the city walls, we will definitely win. When Feng Gui heard the first sentence, he secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. Even if he was the reincarnation of the god of war, he wouldn't dare to say that his chances of winning a battle were that high. After all, a battle was about the right time, the right place and the right people. After listening to Feng Jin's analysis, Feng Gui could vaguely understand where his confidence came from. Looks like I've underestimated Lu Lanting. Feng Gui and Feng Jin sat facing each other sipping their tea. The tea burner beside them was boiling, emitting white steam. The two of them were silent for a while. Feng Jin broke the tense atmosphere. This time, many heroes of Dongqing will definitely be gathered for the rescue of the emperor. Brother, do you want to go and join in the fun? Nanxing had been destroyed, Dongqing was nearing its end and Zhongzhou was beginning to decline. The remaining Beiyuan and Xichong were also in chaos. The entire world had already been embroiled in the whirlpool of war. Unless a wise ruler unified the world, the chaos of the 16 kingdoms would inevitably return. If the Feng family wanted to continue for thousands of generations, they had to get past this hurdle and fight for the throne. There were millennium-old aristocratic families in the world, but there was no millennium-old royal family. The Feng family had no interest in that position and continued to follow the path of support. As a Zongzi, whether he was willing or not, Feng Gui had to choose someone with potential to be his lord. Now that the rescue of the emperor was being carried out, all the famous heroes would be gathered in one place. Why wouldn't Feng Gui go and join in the fun? Feng Gui's eyes carried a hint of coldness. His tone was calm as he said, looking at the situation in Dongqing, there are only a few forces that can barely catch my eye. Among them the biggest is Lu Shi and his son. The rest of the small fries either have high ambitions but low abilities, or are unlucky and have weak foundations. At most they can stir up trouble in their own territory. In my opinion it will be difficult for them to achieve great things. It doesn't matter if I go or not. There was a saying, don't look for a boyfriend in a rubbish heap. If it were Feng Gui, he would also refuse to choose a wise lord from a group of small fries. To put it more bluntly, apart from a few specific forces, the rest were not presentable. There was no need for Feng Gui to even consider them. The world was so big, why was there a need to restrict the candidate to a small Dongqing? Feng Jin agreed with his elder brother's words. In this era wars could not be fought on a whim. The preparations before a war were very complicated. Jiang Pingji sent the order to Fengyi County and got her informant to secretly contact Enchui to ask him about the progress on his side. She thought that they could rest during the new year but they were still too young. When Qiguan Rang and the others received the news, they all thought that they had not slept enough that morning and were hallucinating. Su Ku and the others passed the letter around. Jiang Pingji explained very clearly in the letter that they had to fight this war even if they did not want to. Yang Si curled his lips. How troublesome. Who would go to war during the new year? Su Ku knew that Yang Si had been in a bad temper recently. Who asked the government affairs of Qingan district to be placed on Yang Si's shoulders. The kitchen provided 4 to 5 meals a day, but the fat that Yang Si had just gained was still visibly thinning out. They were busy. Qiguan Rang said, let's discuss this with the officers first. We have to confirm the soldiers who will go to war as soon as possible. Su Ku was in charge of the logistics. The rations and fodder needed for the war had already been supplied. He was basically in charge of everything. From the letter that Jiang Pingji sent, she was not asking for their opinions. She was only informing them of a fact. As a capable general, all they could do now was to do their best to prepare for the war. Yang Si let out a long sigh and secretly rolled his eyes. Qiguan Rang and Su Ku were busy preparing for war. This meant that more than half of the government affairs of Fengyi County would be piled on his shoulders. This was going to exhaust him to death. Sacrificing my life for a meal, your master is really stupid. Yang Si rolled his dead fish eyes. The official documents on the table were already piled high, casting a shadow that could envelop his entire body. The page boy had been captured by Yang Si to be an able-bodied man. From the beginning he stumbled and became adept at government affairs now. Who could understand the hardships he had gone through? He laboriously carried a large pile of bamboo slips over and placed them beside the table with a clang. He supported himself against the pile of bamboo slips and panted. Chapter 621. The boy servant said, Mr. is not stupid. It's just that Mr. Zixiao and the others are too cunning. They know that you can't resist the temptation of delicacies, but they still use food to seduce you. Sir, why don't you take some time to secretly learn from a chef? Once you've learned the skills, let's escape. The corners of Yang Si's mouth twitched. His tongue had been spoiled by the chefs of Fengyi County. If he left here, wouldn't he starve to death? Would they starve to death or die of exhaustion? This was a difficult choice. As a foodie, Yang Si decisively chose the latter. The former was too cruel. Because of the imperial edict to rescue the emperor, not only was Jiang Pingji's plan disrupted, but even the strategists and generals under her were busy. Even Enchui, who was working as a spy in Qingda County, was affected. When he received the contact from the informant, he thought that Jiang Pingji was going to send him supplies again. But Enchui was a cautious person. He had already sent over a batch of resources before, and they had not finished using them yet. How could he send them over again? When he thought of this, Enchui's first thought was that his identity had been exposed. He was worried, so he asked a few of his sworn brothers to protect him in secret while he went to meet the informant. Enchui's identity had not been exposed. The informant had come to inform them that the plan had been brought forward. Enchui was suspicious. Why didn't they wait until spring to start the war? The informant said, I don't know about this either. I heard that it has something to do with the imperial edict to rescue the king. This news has already spread. And Chui wasn't someone who was good at strategizing. For a moment he didn't understand the connection between rescuing the emperor and bringing forward Jiang Pingji's plan. He didn't ask in detail. After all, the job of an informant was to contact him, so he didn't know much. After Chui went back, he thought about it deeply. His heart was restless. He hurriedly gathered a few of his brothers for a discussion. He suppressed his excitement and his cheeks were slightly distorted. This is a great opportunity for us brothers to rescue the emperor. If Jiang Pingji kept her promise and gave Chui 10% of her wealth and manpower, he could use this 10% to rescue the king and reap some benefits. Most of his sworn brothers were uncivilized people. They admired Chui's knowledge and were even more grateful for his sincere treatment. When Chui said it would be profitable, they believed him. The dark-skinned man first felt happy for Chui, cupping his fists to congratulate him. Then a look of hesitation appeared on his face. But, big brother, we haven't bribed enough people. Will Fengyi County be dissatisfied? Chui said, fighting a war isn't something that can be fought on a whim. They still need to prepare the soldiers' rations and come up with a battle plan. No matter what, it will take some time. In addition to the march, it will take about half a month. If we brothers work together, we won't have to worry about anything not being done. However, despite the urgency of the situation, we cannot give ourselves away because of this and arouse the suspicion of the Red Lotus group. We must be cautious. The black-faced man nodded as he listened. He had complete trust in Anne's words. Don't worry, big brother. How can you not rest assured when we are handling this matter? I will definitely do it properly and not leave a single flaw. Chui had a gratified look on his face. The thatched hut was filled with brotherly love and joy. Elsewhere, Huang Song was steadily expanding his territory. Like Jiang Pingji, he was caught unprepared by the imperial edict to rescue the emperor. Although he was the descendant of a eunuch, Huang Tan was the emperor's confidant. He sold his official position and received an unknown amount of money and rations. He was secretly very wealthy. In addition, Huang Song's father loved to do business. He had also accumulated a rich family property for Huang Song. With money, rations, and Huang Tan's support in the court, Huang Song's power grew steadily. He already had more than 10,000 soldiers under his command. When he received the imperial edict to rescue the emperor, he was so worried that his scalp itched. Under Feng Ju's instigation, Huang Song had long given up his desire to be a virtuous official. If someone were to label him as a rebel and a traitor, he would not be able to defend himself. Under such circumstances, he felt a little guilty. If he responded to the imperial edict to rescue the emperor, would he not be walking right into a trap? If he did not have the intention to rebel, why would a small district magistrate of Diang district raise 10,000 soldiers? Feng Ju snorted and said, What are you afraid of, my lord? If they pursue this matter, you still have Lu Shi to bear the brunt. If they pursue this matter, they will pursue him first, then my lord. Now that the royal family has fallen, they have issued an imperial edict to rescue the emperor. They can't wait for the troops to be strong so that they can defeat Prince Changsho. It's a good thing that my lord has 10,000 troops. Why would I blame you? Huang Song looked embarrassed. Yes, why was he nervous and guilty? Lu Shi had brazenly captured Fengyi County and taken Shangyang County from the Feng family. Now he was coveting Qingde County. In the blink of an eye, the entire Wanzhou was about to fall into Lu Shi's hands. He, Huang Song, had only managed to control Maoda County. If they were to pursue this matter, Lu Shi was the biggest rebel and a traitor. He could only be regarded as a small soldier waving the flag. So, should we respond to the imperial edict to rescue the emperor? Huang Song was different from Jiang Pingji. Although Jiang Pingji occupied 2 counties, Shangyang County had not completely surrendered. That was a hidden danger. In order to solve this hidden danger, she could only take down Qingde County in one go. After expanding her military force, she would turn around and deal with the local aristocrats in Shangyang County so that they would not dare to cause trouble. In comparison, Huang Song did not have so many scruples. Qing Jing said, I think that the imperial edict to rescue the emperor is a good opportunity to show my lord's loyalty and benevolence. Naturally, we must go. Qing Jing's thoughts coincided with Jiang Pingji's. It was a good platform to poach talents. The imperial edict to rescue the emperor was not the main point. The main point was that Huang Song could take the opportunity to show his talents and conduct and attract talents to his side. In layman's terms, It was using the platform to advertise and promote oneself. Feng Ju seconded the idea. The other strategists in the government office also agreed. Huang Song made up his mind and made a final decision. Rescue the emperor? Go. For a moment all the forces big and small had different thoughts. Because of the imperial edict to rescue the emperor, people's hearts were wavering. While the other forces gathered their troops and prepared to rescue the emperor, Jiang Pingji had already begun the final preparations before the war. This is the information sent back by our informant. Take a look. Because the war was about to begin, Jiang Pingji and Wei Xi returned to Fengyi County first. The various government affairs in Shangyang County were left to Feng Zhen and Feng Jin to handle. Although Feng Zhen talked about going on strike all day, he completed his work very well. Feng Zhen was uninhibited, treacherous and sly. He was extremely good at dealing with people. He was the most suitable person to deal with the gentry in Shangyang County. As for whether he would die of exhaustion? She believed in the old saying, a scourge lives for 1,000 years. Feng Zhen was definitely someone with a long life. Moreover, Feng Jin was also helping him in Shangyang County. He wouldn't die of exhaustion. Although the Red Lotus group is just a motley crew, many ants can kill an elephant. It's a headache to have so many people piled together. Jiang Pingji tucked her hands into her sleeves and sat on the seat of honor. Her hair still had snow on it. She had held an emergency meeting as soon as she arrived in Shangyang District. She hadn't even had a hot meal yet. District Magistrate Lu wants to end the war quickly. We need to be cautious in this first battle. If we can take down a city in a flash, the morale of the Red Lotus group will definitely collapse. Yang Si bowed and said, if we can't take it down after a long time, or if we are at a disadvantage, it will easily affect the morale of the Red Lotus group. The Red Lotus group has the advantage in numbers. If their morale is boosted, it is very likely to prolong the war, which is very disadvantageous to us. Chapter 622. Time was limited. Jiang Pingji couldn't waste too much time with the Red Lotus group. The longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for her. So, she had an idea. Jiang Pingji's eyes flickered slightly. Wei Xi's heart pounded. He had a vague sense of foreboding. He knew her too well. Every time she showed such an expression and gaze, she must be brewing some wicked idea in her heart. Jiang Pingji asking Yang Si for a plan was within his expectations. Since he dared to ask, he naturally would not be unprepared. District Magistrate Lu, please look here. Yang Si pointed to the topographic map in the government office and said, I think we can attack from here. Jiang Pingji looked in the direction Yang Si was pointing and found that it was an abandoned small town on the border of Qingda County. On the surface, the terrain didn't seem to be special, but if that was the case, Yang Si wouldn't have recommended this place. From here? She frowned. The others also followed Yang Si's train of thought. Like Yang Si, Qiguan Rang liked to use treacherous schemes. He was telepathic with him and quickly understood Yang Si's plan. Yang Si's goal was not this small town with poor defense at all. His goal was the mountain road behind the town. Meng Hun lowered his head and scratched the old skin on his hand. Occasionally he turned his head to talk to Lu Yue about something. Both of them were experienced and knew that with their little knowledge they couldn't give much good advice. Dian Yen and Li Yun, the two curious babies, were different. Over the past 6 months, Dian Yen had been promoted by Jiang Pingji again and again. He was now the deputy captain of the recruit camp and was considered a hot newcomer. If there were no accidents, he would also lead the troops to attack the Red Lotus group this time. However, his personality was more reserved and calm. He buried the questions he didn't understand in his heart and prepared to ask for advice in private. In comparison, Li Yun was more extroverted. He had a good relationship with everyone present, and he would ask any questions he had directly. He said, Mr. Yang, I look left and right. There doesn't seem to be anything special here. Yang Si smiled faintly and said, No, Han Mei, look here again. Do you still think there's nothing special about this place? He moved his finger. Just as Qiguan Rang expected, Yang Si's goal was the mountain road behind the small town. Lin still didn't understand. Yang Si explained, if we want to use the fastest speed to take down the Red Lotus group and crush their morale, we can't just rely on elite soldiers and good generals. If the Red Lotus group was determined to hold their ground and concentrate their forces against District Magistrate Lu, The longer the Red Lotus group dragged this out, the more disadvantageous it would be for District Magistrate Liu. Moreover, it was close to the new year. Any slight setback would greatly damage our morale. Under such circumstances, we can only concentrate our forces to attack one place and catch them off guard. Only then will our chances of victory be higher. Yang Si had a good impression of Li Yun. Previously, this young fellow even knitted a pair of warm gloves and a circular scarf for him. Therefore, Yang Si, who usually did not like to bother with outsiders, was surprisingly patient with Li Yun. He continued, "This mountain road was built during the chaotic times of the 16 kingdoms. It has been in disrepair for many years and is difficult to traverse, so it has long been abandoned. The people prefer the flat and safe official road. Before the official road was built, this mountain road connected Fenghu County and Jingmen County. The territorial division system of the Great Xia dynasty was similar to the county system that the viewers in the livestream knew, but there were differences. The 5 countries of Dongqing, Nanxing, Beiyuan, Xichang, and Zhongzhou all claimed to be the orthodox Great Xia dynasty. Many of their systems were copied from the previous dynasty. However, certain changes were made in the process of copying. Fengyi County included Qingan District, Jiaoping District, Maolin District, and Xiangyang District. They were all in Jiang Pingji's hands now, so I won't go into detail. Qingda County, on the other hand, also had 4 districts: Honglian District, Jinmen District, Fenghu District, and Qiyu District. The founder of the Red Lotus Group's ancestral home was in Honglian District, so the cult he founded was also named after Red Lotus. The small town that Yang Si pointed out was actually a junction point near Fenghu County and Jinmen County. At first it was just a remote small village. Because the mountain road connected the 2 places for commerce, merchants came and went frequently. The place gradually became prosperous and slowly became a small town. However, the mountain road was difficult to traverse. In the middle of the Great Xia dynasty, the government chose another place to build an official road, and the mountain road was gradually abandoned. Without the economy brought by merchants coming and going, the prosperous small town also began to decline. Now, as a sentry point for the Red Lotus Group, it had regained some popularity. However, no one had paid attention to that mountain road for a long time. Even if it was still drawn on the topographic map, no one would consider it, whether it was a march to war or a business trip. After Yang Si's explanation, Li Yun finally understood Yang Si's little plan. He said, "Mr. Yang, do you mean that we should use this mountain road to raid Jinmen District and Fenghu District separately?" Yang Si shook his head and said, "Although the Red Lotus Group is a motley crew, they have a large number of people. If we split our forces to attack, I'm afraid there will be obstacles which will be disadvantageous to us. According to the situation on the mountain road, I suggest that we focus on attacking Jinmen District first. Look here, although the mountain road leading to Jinmen District is longer than the other one, the slope is gentler, which can help the soldiers save energy. It will also be convenient to attack the city when the time comes." According to his plan, it was best to concentrate the troops on a surprise attack on one county and then plot other things after capturing it. They did not have as many troops as the Red Lotus Group, so it was not safe to split up. Li Yun made a sound of agreement and had another question. "If we use the mountain road, what about the siege weapons? Since it is a mountain road that has been abandoned for many years, it is not very strong. The soldiers can still pass if they are careful, but if they bring ladders or siege logs, it will be dangerous. If there are no siege weapons, even if we transfer 20,000 elite troops over, they can still delay us by relying on the city walls. Even if they won, they would probably have to ruthlessly dig out a piece of flesh. The troops that had been trained for so long were all elites and treasures in the eyes of the generals. If they died in a siege battle without siege weapons, it would be a somewhat unjust death." Since Yang Si dared to suggest this, he naturally had a countermeasure. The corners of his lips curled up a little and he turned to face Jiang Pingji. "This matter naturally depends on District Magistrate Liu." Li Yun was surprised. "What does this have to do with the Lord?" Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows frivolously, her posture calm and unruffled. Faced with Yang Si suddenly throwing the blame at her, she steadily caught it. She said, "Just as Han Mei said, it is difficult to transport siege weapons through the mountain road. If that is the case, then we will not transport them." Li Yun was anxious and hurriedly said, "But my lord, if there are no siege weapons, how can the soldiers climb up the city walls?" Meng Hun, who was sitting next to Li Yun, secretly tugged at his sleeves. indicating that he should not be so agitated. Only then did Li Yun realize that he had stood up agitatedly, giving off a sense of déjà vu. His handsome face blushed and he obediently returned to his seat. He apologized, "I lost my composure just now, please forgive me, my lord." Chapter 623. The Spy. Although everyone knew about this battle plan relied too much on the performance of the spy. It could be said that the success of the spy depended on whether the spy's performance was good. If the spy's acting skills were good and he fooled the Red Lotus group, he would definitely succeed. But what if the spy's acting skills were awkward, were exposed, or didn't meet the expected standards? They feigned an attack on Fenghu County and focused on Jinmen County. If the Red Lotus group didn't withdraw their troops from Jinmen County, it would be awkward. Su Ku and the others were a little worried that they would place their hopes on an unknown spy without a proper way out. Among those present, only Wei Ci was confident. Not only did he understand Jiang Pingji, but he also understood An Chui. With regards to Jiang Pingji, Wei Ci could at most speculate her mood and plans through her words and actions, but she liked to play her cards unpredictably. It was good enough that Wei Ci could guess correctly once or twice out of 10 times. Wei Ci had been with him for many years. He had long understood this person thoroughly. If the acting skills of all the feudal vassals were ranked, An Chui would definitely be in the top 3. The conditions offered by Jiang Pingji were too tempting. An Chui would bite the bait even if he knew it was a trap, not to mention that he hadn't discovered it yet. As long as he helped Jiang Pingji conquer Qingda County, An Chui could take half of the captured men and money. The royal family of Dongqing had issued an edict to rescue the emperor. An Chui wanted to use this springboard to develop. The 10% of the men and money that Jiang Pingji promised him were extremely important. Jiang Pingji wanted to use Qingda County to expand her military strength and land. She wanted to suppress the aristocrats in Shangyang County and stabilize her foundation. An Chui also wanted to use 10% of the men as capital to join the ranks of the Rescue the Emperor forces and take the opportunity to develop. Their interests were the same. An Chui yearned for victory even more than Jiang Pingji. Under this kind of temptation, even without the urging of others, An Chui would do his best to make this happen. He would do everything he could to make this happen. Just as Wei Ci was thinking about how to dispel everyone's worries and reassure them, Jiang Pingji spoke. She said, "Everyone's worries are not without reason. I've thought about it carefully and intend to tell you something." Wei Ci's heart skipped a beat. He was about to speak, but he was still a step too late. Jiang Pingji said, "I plan to lead the vanguard battalion in this attack." These few words were like firecrackers thrown into a pot of boiling water, causing an explosion. Needless to say, both the strategists led by Su Ku and the generals led by Meng Hun were firmly against it. They knew that Jiang Pingji fought bravely, but their lord was the one who kept watch at the rear and stabilized the situation. If she ran to the front line to kill the enemy and exposed her identity, the enemy would focus on her. What should she do then? No matter how brave a person was, when faced with thousands of blades, he could only wait to be chopped into minced meat. Yangxi was surprised. He didn't seem to have expected Jiang Pingji's solution to be this. He had never seen how Jiang Pingji looked like when she killed people. He thought she was just being arrogant and liked to play the hero. He suddenly had a headache. "Magistrate Liu, you should consider the bigger picture. As everyone's lord, how could you disregard the danger and personally go into battle?" It was one thing for her to go into battle personally, but she still wanted to lead the vanguard battalion. What was the vanguard battalion for? The vanguard battalion was responsible for scouting the path for the entire army, scouting the enemy's situation, checking out the terrain, or conducting reconnaissance or probing attacks in order to disrupt the enemy's formation and boost their morale. The tasks were arduous and were usually made up of the most elite soldiers of the entire army. In other words, the vanguard battalion was the first unit in the army to fight with the enemy. Under normal circumstances, the reduction of members would start from the vanguard battalion. Entering the vanguard battalion meant that one could go and meet the King of Hell. Everyone's obstructions and objections drifted into her left ear and out of her right ear. No matter how eloquent their words were, she remained unmoved. Seeing the familiar scene, the audience in the livestream room expressed their delight. "Tomorrow Gaokao Law. Ha, don't you think this scene is familiar? When we attacked Qingan district previously, the streamer also wanted to go to the front line, but in the end she was stopped by the little princesses under her. Now the team of the little princesses has expanded further, and there are more people obstructing the streamer. Should we take a gamble and see if the streamer or the little princesses will win? Cheering little angels, #despise. You all said that they are the little princesses. According to the streamer's habit of spoiling them, they will definitely be persuaded in the end. Putting aside this point, the battlefield has no eyes. As the backbone, the streamer is indeed not suitable to take risks. Shurging, you are all Am I the only one who feels sorry for the streamer? She is actually more suitable to be a general, not a lord. As a general, she can fight on the battlefield and unleash her wild nature. She can take the head of the enemy's general amidst thousands of troops and make the enemy tremble in fear. However, Jiang Pingji was everyone's backbone and their lord. She had become a panda that was protected in disguise. Perfect 10 beauties. The commenter above is not alone. Every time I see the little princesses obstructing the streamer, I feel uncomfortable. If it happens a few more times, I will turn from a fan to a hater. The streamer is a tiger or a lion, not a panda that is locked up in a zoo and carefully served. There was a lot of discussion on the bullet screen in the livestream room. Naturally, Jiang Pingji did not miss it. The idle audience compared her to a panda that was being protected, and the strategists and generals as little princesses. She felt that it was quite fitting. Then, there is no need to persuade me anymore. I have made up my mind. Jiang Pingji's gaze became determined. If she continued to be trapped here and was associated with a bunch of government affairs all day, she had almost forgotten how exhilarating it was to ride a horse and kill the enemy was. I will lead the vanguard battalion. This time we must conquer Jinmen district with the fastest speed and the lowest casualties. Apart from me, who among the generals can do it? This matter is decided. Meng Hun and the others had fought with Jiang Pingji before. Whether it was one-on-one combat or leading troops into battle, there was indeed a huge gap between them and Jiang Pingji. Yang Si was stunned and could not help but turn his gaze to Jiang Pingji. After the meeting, Yang Si pulled Wei Xi aside and whispered into his ear. This lord of yours, can she still go to the battlefield with such a small body? Wei Xi was still immersed in his own thoughts. He was interrupted by Yang Si. He raised his head and said in a slightly mocking tone, My lord's martial arts are extraordinary and she is brave and invincible. Why can't she go to the battlefield? Let's not talk about anything else. If you were her opponent, you wouldn't be able to defeat her even if she gave you a handicap of 2 legs, 1 hand and 4 fingers. Yang Si almost choked on Wei Xi's words. What was wrong with Wei Xi? The moment he opened his mouth, he ended the conversation. Is she really as powerful as you say? Yang Si revealed a doubtful expression. Jiang Pingji was not short, but her figure was not burly. She looked a little lean and did not look like she could fight. Wei Xi urged, If you don't believe me, why don't you give it a try? But come to think of it, why did you suddenly make such a suggestion? Yang Si was just a part-time worker. He stayed behind for the sake of delicious food, but now he took the initiative to offer a suggestion. Yang Si looked away and said angrily, Do you think I want to? Don't you think about your lord's temperament? Once I've boarded this pirate ship, can I still leave? If Lu Shi was just a small district magistrate, I naturally wouldn't be afraid. Now that he's about to become the magistrate, how can I escape? Chapter 624. Yang Si was indeed a little scared. He didn't expect Jiang Pingji to develop so quickly. In just 1 or 2 years she had transformed from a vacant district magistrate in Xiangyang district, which was occupied by the Tsing-Yi army, to the prefecture magistrate who practically controlled a state. For many people who had been through the ups and downs of officialdom, it was a long road that could not be completed in a lifetime from a county magistrate to a prefecture governor. The more Yang Si understood Jiang Pingji, the stronger the sense of urgency in his heart. You could say that he was a coward or afraid of death, but no matter what, it was better than losing his life. Wei Xi and Yang Si had known each other for many years. It was easy for smart people to communicate. The two of them did not need to speak too clearly and they could understand each other's thoughts. In the words of the livestream viewers, these two guys seemed to have slept together. The gayer they were, the stronger they were. In that case, Wei Xi folded his hands into his sleeves and said with a faint smile, Are you going to change the way you address my lord? Yang Si's expression stiffened and his face turned a little darker. After a while he stammered, "No matter what, I'm also a talented person. If I admit defeat so easily, where do you want me to put my face? It's fine if you want me to change my words, but first, let your master express something." Back then he had said it in a loud and clear voice, making a solemn vow. In the past his words were still lingering in his ears. If Yang Si took the initiative to give in, wouldn't it be a slap in the face? No matter what, he had to be reserved for a period of time. If he took the initiative to throw himself at her, what if she didn't take it seriously? When Jiang Pingji saw his talents and usefulness, she would take the initiative to extend an olive branch to him. Only then could there be harmony between the ruler and the minister. Wei Xi lifted his sleeves and covered the smile at the corner of his lips. He said, "If you want to wait for the Lord to open her mouth and admit defeat, I'm afraid it will be difficult. Jingrong, you've been with Her Highness for some time. When have you ever seen her give in to anyone? Don't blame me for not reminding you that you still have a bad debt with Prince Changsho. If Prince Changsho remembers it and starts to pursue the old debt of you teasing him, tee." Wei Xi shook his head regretfully as he spoke. Yang Xi's expression seemed to be cramping up. "You've touched my sore spot. Can you not mention Prince Changsho?" After Wei Xi's reminder, Yang Xi remembered a very deceitful matter. When he jumped ship from Prince Changsho's side, he dug a big hole for Prince Changsho. If Yang Xi had not secretly taken revenge on Prince Changsho, causing the front line to lose the battle, according to the situation at that time, Prince Changsho would have conquered Qinzhou long ago, killed the emperor and ascended to the throne. How could he have been in a stalemate for more than a year, turned from the original advantage to disadvantage, and faced the predicament of retreating because of a lack of food? It could be said that if Meng Zhan hadn't intervened to form an alliance, Prince Changsho wouldn't have been able to hold on and would have retreated back to his fief. If one were to say who Prince Changsho hated the most, Yang Si would definitely be in the top 3. Wei Xi smiled. Dimples appeared on his handsome face, giving people the illusion that 100 flowers were blooming at the same time, and in an instant, they saw all the peerless beauties in the world. All right, let's not talk about this anymore." Wei Xi walked side by side with Yang Si, and there was a smile in between his words. In the beginning he promised to be fine, but in the latter half of his sentence he changed the topic. "However, Ci and Jingrong have known each other for many years. There is one thing that I must remind you of." Yang Si asked him with a sullen face, "What is it?" Wei Xi said straightforwardly, "In such a big Dongqing, who else can protect you other than the Lord? The Lord is like a donkey. She won't walk when you're led but will retreat when you beat her. The more you force her, the more she likes to be stubborn. To put it bluntly, she's willful. Jingrong has always called her District Magistrate Lu. Have you ever seen her mind? I'm afraid it's impossible to expect her to give in first. However, if Jingrong doesn't give in, her life will be in danger." Yang Si's face was already as black as the bottom of a pot. His hands were itching and he really wanted to strangle Wei Xi to death. In the past, when he saw Wei Xi, he felt that he was a bright and noble person. Now that he looked at Wei Xi again, he felt that he might have been blind. When this person was split open with a knife, his flesh and blood were all black, not to mention his heart. Go ahead and be sarcastic. If you don't watch your mouth, be careful that you don't fall one day. Yang Si snorted through his nose and he seemed to be extremely angry. The two good friends bickered endlessly and they left the government office together. Su Ku and the others were also busy with work, so they took their leave one after another. Only Qiguan Rang slowly rubbed against the mat, unwilling to get up. When everyone had left, Jiang Pingji's gaze fell on Qiguan Rang. She asked, "Wenjing, what's the outcome of the matter I asked you to ask?" Qiguan Rang nervously pinched his beard. His intuition told him that something big was going to happen, but Jiang Pingji's expression was still calm, which made him fearful. "My lord." Qiguan Rang's lips moved and he could only squeeze out 2 words after opening his mouth. He did not have the confidence that he usually had. Jiang Pingji chuckled. She temporarily closed the streaming room and said, "Say it. No matter what the outcome is, your lord will be able to bear it. I asked you to write a letter to Master Wei Yuan. Looking at the time, there should be a reply by now." Qiguan Rang hesitated for a while and after some deliberation he told her the contents of Master Wei Yuan's letter. Jiang Pingji listened with a calm expression. The more she acted like this, the more Qiguan Rang felt frightened. Finally, My lord, I think this matter might be a misunderstanding. Please, my lord. Jiang Pingji lowered her eyes and chuckled. Her expression did not show the slightest hint of worry. Wenjing, you don't have to persuade me or comfort me. I've been aware of this for a long time, but I don't have any evidence. Jiang Pingji curled her lips. Her nonchalant attitude was very natural and there was not a single flaw in it. Moreover, Wenjing, this matter is far more complicated than you think. It may even involve areas that ordinary people can't imagine. However, I am confident that I can solve it. I am the lord you chose, so you must have some confidence. If I can't even handle such a matter, won't I be letting down your trust in me? Although Qiguan Rang's mind was treacherous and his scheming style seemed to be similar to Yang Si and Feng Zhen's, there were differences between the three of them. Yang Si loved to use tricks and schemes, but he could see the facts clearly, distinguish the severity of the situation, and was the best at judging the situation. Feng Zhen loved to do things recklessly, and he did everything according to his whims. His train of thought was cunning and his schemes were strange and ever-changing. As for Qiguan Rang, he had some of the characteristics of Yang Si and Feng Zhen, but he was also different from them. Feng Zhen loved to show off, but Qiguan Rang did not like to stand out. He engraved the words, "Be wise and play safe," into his bones. Yang Si's weakness was very obvious. If the situation was stronger than him, he would give in. Qiguan Rang was quite stubborn in a certain aspect and he had very strong principles. Be wise and play safe did not mean, go along with the flow. Qiguan Rang was like this, yet he chose Jiang Pingji. He had almost bet everything on her. Not for anything else, but for the trust and loyalty of the group of little princesses under her, Jiang Pingji would not allow herself to lose. Jiang Pingji's attitude was firm. Qiguan Rang could only swallow the words that were in his stomach. Since his lord had already made a decision, he did not say anything more. Chapter 625. They were silent for a while. Qiguan Rang asked cautiously, "If that's the case, how does my lord plan to deal with it?" Jiang Pingji snorted and said, "I'll pretend that I don't know for now. I want to see how long that person can endure. I've already found a clue as to his motive. I'm curious to see what his expression will be like when his schemes come to naught." Qiguan Rang knew too little about the inside story, so he was confused. But Jiang Pingji's tone made him shudder with fear. Then we just leave it like this? Don't we have to take precautions? Qiguan Rang asked. Jiang Pingji raised her brows and smiled slyly. She said with certainty, "Before I become the ruler of the world, that person won't lay a hand on me. Not only will he not be a burden, but he will also do his best to help. It's a free gift, so I'll take it. That person thinks that I don't know anything and even set up layers of barriers to mislead me. He doesn't know that sometimes being too thorough can also be a flaw." Qiguan Rang thought that Jiang Pingji was done, so she added another sentence. "No one else can know about this matter after it comes out of your mouth and passes through my ears." She never hit someone unprepared. Wei Yuan's reply seemed to have no content, but Jiang Pingji had already grasped the crux of the matter. Scheming, right? Do you really think that all the smart people in the world are dead? Since they want to hurt each other, let's see who's more clever. Jiang Pingji raised her hand and rubbed between her brows. She said, "Wenjing, help me draft a letter." Qiguan Rang asked subconsciously, "To whom?" Jiang Pingji replied, "To my father. Speaking of which, my brother is 12 years old this year. It's not good to always stay in Hejian County. He should have an elder to guide him. I'm busy with work, but my father is free. Let him guide him. Although he's a son of a concubine, his surname is also Lu. If he grows up crooked, won't it be a disgrace to the family? By doing this, we can beat that person up without alerting him." She was also very powerful. Lu Huan, the daughter of Prince Changshou and Wang Huiyun, eventually married into the Dongqing royal family and married the son of the emperor and Wang Huiyun. They had the same mother but different fathers. The siblings were in a mess. Lu Shi, the mastermind, gained a wave of sympathy from passers-by. As for this bastard son, his identity was also quite impressive. Who said that women were petty? When a man held a grudge, his means of revenge were even more terrifying. Jiang Pingji had never thought that there would be so many demons and monsters gathered in the small backyard of the Lus. Qiguan Rang's expression froze. He thought that Jiang Pingji had suffered a great blow, which was why she said that. He looked closely and realized that she was very clear-headed. Yes. Qiguan Rang agreed. Jiang Pingji happily ended the topic and swept away the gloomy atmosphere from before. She turned to ask Qiguan Rang about his opinion on Yang Xi's scheme. Qiguan Rang appreciated Yang Xi's stratagem very much. He was very good at using fake and real. Fighting a war was never a simple matter. Strange and treacherous schemes often had unexpected benefits. They had planted spies in the Red Lotus group. If they operated properly, taking down Jinmen County was a sure thing. The only flaw was, Qiguan Rang's expression was grave. My lord's loyal and devoted elite soldiers and generals, why take the risk? The lords of other families wish they could stay at home, always remembering that a gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall. On the other hand, his lord was thinking about how to run out every day. If she made a mistake, no one knew where she would have run off to. Previously there were many people around, so Qiguan Rang did not speak much to persuade her. Now that there were only the two of them, there was no need to worry about many things. Jiang Pingji was also very straightforward. Wenjing, do you still remember what I was like when you first met me? I did whatever I wanted to do and no one could force me to do what I didn't want to do. I was the playboy from Hejin County. Ever since I became the magistrate of Xiangyang District, I feel like I've been restrained, like a fierce tiger locked in a cage. The sharp teeth of a fierce tiger are used to bite its prey, not to be admired. After hearing this, Qiguan Rang's face turned pale and he hurriedly explained. Why would my lord have such an idea? No one else has ever thought of restraining my lord. He was really frightened. It was really frightening to be accused of such a serious crime. Jiang Pingji said, I know you're worried about me because I'm your lord, your backbone. If I die, the forces that we've conquered will also collapse. But Wenjing, have you ever seen a general cowering behind his soldiers because he's afraid of dying in battle? When hasn't he charged and broken through enemy lines, running at the forefront? I'm your lord, but I can also be a general who is good at war. There's no conflict between the two. Believe me, I'll lead you to the most honorable position in the world. Those who did not understand Jiang Pingji would think that the youth was too arrogant to the extreme. But those who knew her knew that her arrogance would become reality in the end. She said leisurely, Wenjing, if you're really worried about me, why don't you take care of the rear so that I don't have to worry about fighting at the front lines? Qiguan Rang was choked by these hooligan words. When it came to acting shamelessly, who was better at it than his lord? She played the emotional card, acted pitiful, pretended to be innocent, stirred up emotions and evaded the topic. Even if it was Qiguan Rang, he would not be able to handle it. Hence, many attempts to dissuade her to no avail. It became an established fact that Jiang Pingji would lead the vanguard battalion. The soldiers below did not know the bitterness of the strategists. When they heard that the commander of this expedition was their lord, they all seemed to be on steroids. The battle had not yet begun, but their morale was already high. Jiang Pingji was a non-mainstream lord. The place she most often stayed was not the government office, but the woodworking workshop and the military camp. She would patrol there every few days. Occasionally, when she sparred with Li Yun, Meng Hun and Luo Yu on the drill ground, there would always be soldiers who liked to watch the fun secretly watching. For many soldiers, their lord was not a high and mighty deity. Instead, she was a valiant and extraordinary man with nimble skills. In layman's terms, Jiang Pingji was very down to earth. Her actions invisibly shortened the distance between the role of the lord and the soldiers, making the former more approachable to the people. In the face of such a situation, no matter how worried the strategists were, they could only swallow their bitterness. The soldiers had such high expectations of their lord. If they persuaded Jiang Pingji to withdraw from the front lines, it would be a huge blow to their morale. Fengyi County and Qingda County were not far apart. The movement of the troops here had alarmed the Red Lotus group. The Xingyi army was already like a grasshopper at the end of autumn. They could not jump around for more than a few days. If they were to deal with the Xingyi army, there was no need for such a large number of troops. Obviously, the transfer of troops from Fengyi County was directed at the Red Lotus group. When the higher-ups of the Red Lotus group heard this news, their expressions were as grave as still water. One by one, they could not help but criticize Jiang Pingji in their hearts. Chapter 626. Jiang Pingji's unreasonable actions caused the Red Lotus group to panic. The faces of the cult's higher-ups were as dark as if their parents had died. They knew that they were the target of Jiang Pingji's expedition, but they still prayed in their hearts that she was going to find trouble with someone else. As time passed, the information sent back by the informants decreased. The higher-ups began to feel restless. The reason why I called everyone here today is to discuss countermeasures. The chief has not slept well for many days because of this matter. As the chief's right-hand men, we should share the chief's burdens and solve his problems. I wonder if everyone has any good countermeasures? He was a handsome and refined young scholar. He looked reserved and shy, but he was full of bad ideas. Before the troubled times, he was a wastrel who cheated and fooled around with widows all day long. Taking advantage of the earthquake in Shangjing, he rose to become a high-ranking member of the Red Lotus group. He was trusted by the sect leader, and he often used the sect leader's authority as a token of his authority to bully his followers. And Cui was among the crowd. With Jiang Pingji's financial and material assistance, and Cui's plan to win over the hearts of the people went even more smoothly. How could a group of illiterate, ignorant people from the wilderness be a match for Cui, who had a glib tongue? Even if they were wary at first after being tricked by Cui, they wished they could dig out their hearts and be on his good side. Therefore Cui rose from a small leader to a leader who was neither too big nor too small. He was qualified to participate in such a meeting. Just as Wei Ci ridiculed, and Cui's acting skills were superb. In the era of live streaming, winning an Oscar would be a piece of cake. He wanted Jiang Pingji to win more than anyone else, so he worked harder than anyone else. If Jiang Pingji won, the chips that Cui had bet on her would increase. Only then would they have value. Faced with the questions of the higher-ups, the group of illiterate boorish men looked at each other in dismay. Wasn't it a joke to ask them to come up with a plan? The atmosphere at the scene was awkward. The scholar seemed to realize this as well. His cheeks turned slightly red and a hint of embarrassment appeared on his face. He would only ask a group of ignorant boorish men if there was something wrong with his brain. What good ideas could a group of guys with only muscles for brains have? Just as he was thinking about how to bring the topic back and ease the atmosphere, Cui stepped forward. Compared to those brawny and boorish men who didn't wash for 10 days to half a month, Cui, this refined and noble person, was clearly different. Cui, who stood out like a crane in a flock of chickens, stepped forward and said, "This lowly one is willing to contribute his meager strength to the cause of sect master's hegemony." The scholar's eyes lit up. He could smell the scent of his own kind. He quickly asked, "What's your name?" Cui revealed his background, and he did not hide his real name. After all, with the level of the Red Lotus group, it was destined that they would not know who Cui was. "Did you just say that you have an idea?" The scholar asked in a genteel manner, addressing Cui by his courtesy name. "Bushi, tell me quickly. 1 cannot outsmart 2 and 2 cannot outsmart 3. As the strategist that the leader of the Red Lotus group relied heavily on, the scholar's ups and downs were still manageable for ordinary people, but when faced with a strong enemy like Jiang Pingji, his limited knowledge seemed to be stretched thin. Therefore, in order to maintain the supreme leader's trust, he called for this meeting. It was better to have a group of people think of a solution than him alone. Seeing Cui, the scholar felt that he saw hope. Cui's appearance was secondary. The key was his refined and noble aura. At a glance, one could tell that he had a good upbringing and was literate. The scholar stubbornly believed that a scholar was definitely smarter than a boorish man. Cui deliberated for a moment, then said unhurriedly, "In my opinion, now is not the time to be anxious." The scholar's brows furrowed and he was a little displeased. If he was not anxious now, should he wait until a knife was held to his neck? However, it was rare to find a scholar, so the scholar tolerated it. "Why do you say that?" Cui straightened his chest and said energetically, "I heard that the Emperor of Dongqing has issued an edict to rescue the Emperor, ordering the heroes of the world to go rescue the Emperor. This Lu Shi controls Fengyi County and Shangyang County, and has 30,000 to 40,000 troops. Naturally, he will also go rescue the Emperor. If this person does not go, he will be a traitor and all the heroes of the world will have the right to punish him. Therefore Lu Shi must go rescue the Emperor." The scholar was surprised for a moment and a new expression appeared on his face. Why hadn't he thought of this? He looked as if he had been inspired and analyzed the situation. "So, Lu Shi did not mobilize his troops to attack us, but to go south to rescue the Emperor?" Even a dedicated veteran like Cui felt that he could not continue acting in the face of the naive scholar. Who gave the Red Lotus leader the courage to let such an idiot be a military counselor? His brain must have been kicked by a donkey. If Lu Shi mobilized his troops to rescue the emperor, how could he not have even prepared for the new year? According to the current situation in Dongqing, which major force would take the half-dead Dongqing royal family seriously? Because the scholar was the brain of the Red Lotus group and played the role of a counselor, and Cui had to give him face. Therefore he said, there is such a possibility. The scholar was just about to breathe a sigh of relief. As long as they were not fighting the Red Lotus group, however, and Cui added another sentence. However, after careful consideration, I fear that Lu Shi's intentions are not with us, but with the Red Lotus group. The scholar had just breathed a sigh of relief, but he was once again worried. What? And Cui smiled. With a confident demeanor he said, Lu Shi has already stabilized Fengyi County and took over Shangyang County in the winter. Everyone knew what the situation was like in Shangyang County. My group and the Tsingyi army have attacked repeatedly, but we have not been able to conquer it. In other words, Lu Shi has taken over Shangyang County, and his strength is still intact. With the troops from Shangyang County and Fengyi County, this person's power is at its peak. If I were Lu Shi, I would naturally hope to take advantage of this momentum and take down Qingde County in one go so that I can unify Wanzhou. There were only 6 states in Dongqing and Lu Shi alone occupied one. After hearing this, the scholar felt that it made sense. However, if he had been smarter, he would have realized that Cui was only fooling him. Cui spoke a lot and it seemed to make sense, but in reality it was useless. It was mostly nonsense. The scholar was impressed by Cui's intelligence, but he was afraid that if he did not perform as well as Cui, it would affect his prestige in the Red Lotus group. Therefore, the scholar invited Cui to the back hall for a detailed discussion. As soon as they sat down, the scholar hurriedly asked, Duoshi, why did you say that you were in no hurry? Cui frowned secretly. He did not like people calling him by his courtesy name. However, he did not express this negative and irritated emotion. Instead, he looked excited as if he was about to be put in an important position. Chapter 627. When the scholar heard this, his expression turned anxious. Isn't Lu Shi a little too greedy? He wants to rescue the emperor and attack our sect at the same time? He's not afraid of choking to death. Cui was speechless again. Jiang Pingji and the Red Lotus group were enemies. If she did not take advantage of his weakness, would she love him with motherly love? Cui said, don't be impatient, don't be impatient. I said there's no need to be anxious precisely because Lu Shi is too greedy. He wants to have the best of both worlds, so he must expand the results of the battle as quickly as possible. They can't afford to delay a battle if they follow the rules. The scholar was fascinated. He pricked up his ears for fear of missing a word. In this situation, Lu Shi can only concentrate his forces to attack one place. Our sect has many people and countless followers. Why would we be afraid of Lu Shi's mere tens of thousands of troops? If he wants to attack by force, we will concentrate our forces and delay them. After a long time he will naturally retreat. The scholar nodded as he listened, then asked a stupid question. Why would he retreat voluntarily? Cui choked. He really did not want to answer such a stupid question. Because it's to rescue the emperor. Lu Shi's time cannot be delayed. The scholar nodded his head in agreement. He finally understood. In other words, we just need to delay him? As long as they delayed him, Lu Shi would retreat without a fight. Cui agreed. That's exactly what I mean. The scholar asked again, but how do we know where Lu Shi will attack? Qingde County's terrain is not complicated, but it is vast. It is troublesome and a waste of time to send reinforcements. Duoshi, where do you think Lu Shi will concentrate his forces to attack? Cui lowered his eyes. With such a pig brain as a military advisor, it was no wonder that they could not suppress the Tsingyi army. The Red Lotus group had many people, but their brains were too stupid. This is why I said there's no need to be anxious. Cui looked like he was giving advice. He smiled and said, we wait for Lu Shi's next move. Lu Shi is fighting a long-distance battle while we are defending. There are flat official roads in the county. We can move troops much faster than them. Instead of worrying and panicking now and making the people panic, it is better to sit on the fishing platform and wait for Lu Shi to come to us. No matter where he attacks, as long as we keep an eye on him, no matter how he attacks, we will be able to gain the upper hand. and Chui had given the Red Lotus group a solid blow, so much so that the scholar's bones went limp and his mentality swelled to the heavens. When the scholar heard this, his eyes lit up. He held Anne's hands and called her his confidant. And Chui chuckled. He would never befriend a pig. His expression was cold. The scholar asked a few more stupid questions in detail, and Chui answered them in detail without any intention of hiding anything. The scholar was very satisfied with their conversation. He patted Chui's shoulder. You've done well. You've done a great service this time. I'll definitely put in a good word for you in front of the cult master. And Chui revealed an expression of uncontrollable ecstasy on his face, but he pretended to be reserved and humbly declined. However, according to his preliminary test of the scholar, this person would not recommend him to the Red Lotus group's leader. Instead, he would hide him. The Red Lotus group did not need two equally smart strategists. If Chui was too smart and capable, it would make the scholar seem too stupid and useless. And Chui was well aware of this little trick to suppress him. Anyway, he did not need the Red Lotus group's attention. Whether he put in a good word for him or not, it did not mean much to him. The Red Lotus group's leader trusted the scholar more, and Chui could not match this trust in a short period of time. As 007 that Jiang Pingji had planted, and Chui needed the Red Lotus group's leader to believe his words without a doubt. The scholar was the best mouthpiece. As expected, the scholar turned around and reported to the Red Lotus group's leader. He modified Chui's words and shifted them to his own results, not mentioning Chui's existence at all. The Red Lotus group's leader was a stocky man who was less than 5 feet tall. His face was full of pockmarks, and to hide his ugliness he kept a full beard. He and the scholar were from the same hometown. Before the uprising they were on good terms. After the uprising he trusted the scholar. He pinched his beard and muttered to himself for a while. "We'll do as you say. I want to see what Lu Shi is capable of to dare offend a god." As mentioned before, the Tsing-Yi army were bandits and the Red Lotus group were bandits with faith. This leader claimed to be the incarnation of a god who descended to save the people. But in reality, before he became the incarnation of a god, he was just a random doctor who had studied medicine for a few years. By chance, he had obtained a copy of the sect's doctrine that had been passed down during the chaotic times of the 16 kingdoms. After reading it, he felt that it made sense and spread it everywhere. However, the ancient books did not specify which sect it was, so he simply named it after his hometown, Red Lotus District. After a few years, he had accumulated a group of believers in his hometown, Red Lotus District, which laid the foundation for the uprising that followed. Coincidentally, there was an earthquake in Shangjing. The royal family moved the capital, disregarding the lives of the people. He simply raised the doctrine and led his followers in rebellion. If the Red Lotus group had been lucky and had not been stopped by the Tsing-Yi army, it was estimated that the Red Lotus group would have spread throughout the north. It was a pity that luck was not on their side. The Tsing-Yi army suddenly emerged as a new force, and they fought too fiercely with the Red Lotus group in the north. In the end, no one could do anything to the other and no one could develop and grow stronger. Instead, it benefited Jiang Pingji. Because of his advice, the scholar received a large reward. This also strengthened his desire to continue suppressing Chui. However, in order to maintain such a high standard of intelligence, he still needed Chui to be his gunman. In order to further gain the scholar's trust, Chui then helped him solve 2 more problems. In the eyes of the Red Lotus group, their military counselor seemed to have turned on a cheat code. His body shone even more brightly. At the same time, Jiang Pingji had already made preparations for the expedition. The allocated rations were abundant and the selected soldiers were also elites. Even though they stood in the cold wind, their postures were still tall and straight. Jiang Pingji stepped onto the platform and officially announced that she would be the commander-in-chief of the Vanguard Battalion. This time, Li Yun was also promoted from deputy captain to captain. He led the right wing and coordinated with the Vanguard Battalion and the middle troops. This time Meng Hun stayed behind to look after the home. Luo Yu was responsible for the transportation of rations in the rear and shouldered various logistical matters. Dian Yan was appointed deputy captain of the Vanguard Battalion and charged forward with Jiang Pingji. The women's battalion led by Jiang Nongqin was the vanguard to support the Vanguard Battalion's offensive tactics. As for the strategists who would follow the army, Jiang Pingji considered the few people under her command and finally chose Yang Si. Qiguan Rang would oversee the middle troops, Wei Si and Su Ku would stay behind to look after the home, and Yang Si would follow the army into battle. When Yang Si learned of the results, he could not help but be speechless and gasp in surprise. I really don't know if your lord is magnanimous or broad-minded. She even dares to put someone in an important position who has yet to surrender. Wei Si laughed and said, naturally, the lord trusts the people she dares to use. What's more, you're the one who came up with the plan for the surprise attack this time. If I don't bring you along, who will I bring along? It's just that. I heard that the mountain road is treacherous. Jingrong, you must be careful. Yang Si's face darkened like the ashes at the bottom of a pot. Chapter 6:28. The flags fluttered in the wind and the howling cold wind rolled up the snow and ice. As a pregnant woman, White was treated like a little princess. The war horse that accompanied them to the battle this time was replaced by Little White. The situation on the mountain road had been investigated in advance. Large-scale goods could not pass through and the road was rugged and steep. The troops could only go into battle lightly. Jiang Pingji said, let's take down that small town first. The scouts that we send out should be quick-witted. Report back immediately if anything happens. Although it was a surprise attack, Jiang Pingji did not intend to be secretive. She brought a total of 10,000 troops and horses for this battle. The remaining 10,000 and the new recruits were left behind to guard the home. Apart from guarding the home, they were also responsible for the safety of the logistics and the supply route. If the supply route was cut off, the war could not be fought at all. Under normal circumstances, Jiang Pingji could take more people with her. However, the situation in Shangyang County had not been stabilized, so she could not transfer too many troops. She did not want to receive news that her home base had been destroyed after she had just won a great victory at the front line. Little White was gentle and reserved in front of Jiang Pingji and White, but it was like a different horse on the battlefield. Which man did not like a good horse? During the march, Yang Si looked at Little White with envy. Little White seemed to sense his gaze and snorted in his direction. Yang Si, who seemed to be despised by a horse, was speechless. The army set off. Other than the crunching of the snow, the howling wind, and the breathing of the people, there was no other movement in the air. Jiang Pingji was at ease. The march was rather boring, so she simply turned on the streaming room. In an instant, the audience in another dimension received a notification that they had to take advantage of their high hand speed. The 150,000 livestream slots were filled in an instant. Through the camera in the streaming room, the audience could clearly see the scene in front of the camera. It was several times clearer than the popular 1080p. The sky was dark and the snow was blowing. The color under the sky was slightly gray. Jiang Pingji was dressed in a red and white military uniform, which made her look handsome and heroic. Her figure, outlined by the armor, looked slender and well-proportioned. She did not look bloated or clumsy at all. The audience in the streaming room had long been used to her wide-sleeved scholarly or rough image. Now that she was dressed in armor and riding on a tall horse, she looked like a valiant young general who had walked out of a painting. They immediately howled like wolves and the bullet screen whistled. Guangguan Jujio, oh, look what I caught, a handsome streamer. Red and white military uniform, the one on a snow-white horse. She stands in the wind and snow. He's like a goddess in my dreams. Streamer, do you still need a salted fish to warm your bed? Zai Zhizhou, pay. With salted fish warming the bed, wasn't he afraid that the bed would be filled with the smell of fish? I'm different. Host, look at me. I just used shampoo and washed myself from head to toe. I'm clean and I even have a nice fragrance when I walk. Let me warm the bed. I promise the bed won't smell like fish. Goddess Pingji, stop talking. My husband is here. He's wearing red clothes and silver armor and he's riding a big horse. He looks exactly like the streamer. That's enough. I'm going to open the door for my dear husband. We're going to do some he exercises together at night. Jiawa QQ, you're all hysterical. No matter how handsome the streamer is, she's still a woman. Streamer Zheng Shangwo, mediocre person, do you know what love at first sight feels like? The moment I saw the streamer's figure, I decided that I wanted to be gay for her. Even if I had to bend into a mosquito coil, I'd be willing. She's only my husband. Streamer Sishangwo, hey, what's the big deal about being gay for the streamer? I'm even willing to straighten myself for the streamer. Jiang Pingji was secretly surprised to see the quarrel between the wives in the streaming room. This group of capricious fairies had a war of words some time ago over which of her counselors was the husband of the entire nation. What about now? With the streamer as their new love, they had forgotten about their old love. As the husband that 150,000 idol viewers were fighting over, Jiang Pingji found the boring military journey interesting. They stopped to rest midway. Jiang Pingji handed her portion of meat soup to Yang Si. Drink this to warm up. There are still a few days to the destination. Don't tire yourself out. Although Yang Si was a counselor, he belonged to the vanguard battalion. He had to ride a horse to withstand the wind and snow during the march. After a few hours, not only was the inner side of his thighs in pain from the abrasion, but his cheeks were also flushed red from the biting cold wind. He could barely feel them. He wore a circle-shaped scarf and a pair of wool gloves that Li Yun, the little angel, had made out of friendship. He was so cold that his shoulders were shivering. Although the literati of this era also practiced martial arts, their physiques were still much weaker than those of warriors. Trembling, he took the ceramic bowl that Jiang Pingji handed to him. He did not mind the heat and gulped it down in one gulp. The heat spread to his limbs and bones. Heaving a long and comfortable sigh, Yang Si let go of his thoughts. He suddenly thought of something and teased her. Such lousy weather, it's really cold. Fortunately it's me. If it were Zixiao, he'd probably fall sick from the wind. Jiang Pingji casually replied, I know. His body hasn't recovered yet. I won't let him follow the army in this season. Yang Si was stunned after hearing that. He carefully pondered over the deeper meaning of her words. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. Did Lu Shi mean that, if the season was better, the person who followed the army would not be him but Wei Xi? That shouldn't be the case, right? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, Yes, it's exactly what you're thinking. Yang Si was speechless. He really wanted to smash the ceramic bowl in his hand, along with the meat soup inside, onto Jiang Pingji's forehead. What did he do wrong in his previous life to offend Wei Xi and Jiang Pingji? Did he have to be mocked by them in this life? Sob, sob, sob. He felt wronged. If he and Jiang Pingji fell out, it was definitely because she and Wei Xi's mouths were too vicious. Jiang Pingji added with a smile to salvage Yang Si's emotional state, which was on the verge of a breakdown. Of course, Zixiao's health is one aspect. The other aspect is that Jing Rong is outstanding and shouldn't be neglected. Look how artistic she was with her words. It was obvious that she spared no effort to exploit Yang Si's labor and used the casual worker like a mule. In Jiang Pingji's words, it was said that she relied on and trusted Yang Si and could not bear for his talents to be buried. If it were a fool, he would probably be coaxed to tears. Obviously, Yang Si was not a fool, but he had no way to refute. Once again, he sighed with emotion. He had really boarded a pirate ship. If time could be reversed, Yang Si would definitely cling to Huang Song's thigh and never step into Fengyi County. Yang Si laughed coldly. In that case, I have to thank you for thinking highly of me and be deeply grateful. Sooner or later, he had to accept his fate. Yang Si simply changed the way he addressed her. He looked like he had given up. Jiang Pingji seemed to not notice the change in how Yang Si addressed her. Her attitude was natural. There's no need to be deeply grateful, but I will continue to rely on you. The subtext was, continue to work overtime after returning from the war. I think very highly of you. Yang Si looked at the ceramic bowl in his hand. There was still half of the delicious meat soup left. Should he smash the bowl on Jiang Pingji's forehead when she was unprepared, or should he drink it himself? Chapter 629. There was a small town near the border between Jinmen County and Fenghu County. This small town used to be a small village deep in the mountains. During the chaotic times of the 16 Kingdoms, a mountain road was built here to connect the two counties. Commercial trade was frequent, and this place became a good place for merchants to stop and rest. Slowly, it became a small town with a large population. In the middle of the Great Xia dynasty, the government recruited corvée laborers to build the official road. The official road was flat and wide. In contrast, the mountain road was craggy and narrow, full of bumps and bumps. Soon the mountain road was abandoned, and the popularity that had gathered because of the mountain road also dissipated. Now this small city had been forcefully occupied by the Red Lotus group and had become their outpost. Jiang Pingji led the troops closer. Along the way they discovered several enemy scouts, but they were all killed by the vanguard battalion. However, the Red Lotus group had developed from the commoners at the bottom of society. If they really wanted to spy on the situation, it would be impossible to guard against them. When Jiang Pingji was only an hour away from the small town, the news reached the hinterlands of the Red Lotus group. After the leader of the Red Lotus group heard this, he summoned his trusted aide, the scholar, and asked about the plan. The scholar was already used to finding In Chui to be his gunman. On the surface he appeased the cult leader, but in his heart he memorized the information. This matter is quite suspicious. Lu Shi is a treacherous and cunning person. I'm afraid there's something fishy going on. The scholar pretended to be profound as he tried to think of a way to coax the Red Lotus group leader. Group leader, allow me to go back and think about this. I will definitely give you an answer in 4 hours at most. As soon as the leader of the Red Lotus group agreed, the scholar hurriedly went back to seek help from In Chui. In Chui had a script. When he learned that Jiang Pingji would attack the small town according to the original plan, he was overjoyed. He showed a serious expression and pretended to be suspicious. What's so special about that small city? Why did Lu Shi attack that place? The scholar echoed, yes, that place is very creepy. There are ferocious beasts everywhere. Is Lu Shi trying to enter the mountain to feed the mosquitoes? In a war one should not attack on the main road. They did not play their cards according to common sense. In Chui rubbed his forehead with his hand, looking like he had a headache. This was not an act. He really had a headache. What a pig-like teammate. The Red Lotus group wanted to play with Jiang Pingji with their meager skills? Go to bed and sleep. Everything is possible in your dreams. The scholar did not give In Chui a way out. He could only improvise and continue acting out the script. In Chui thought for a long time. Finally, he had an idea and realized that the commotion had scared the scholar. I've got it. In Chui's face was filled with uncontrollable joy. He said, that small town is located near Jinmen County and Fenghu County. Lu Shi wants to use a surprise attack on one of the counties. However, the scholar's intelligence couldn't keep up with the pace. He even asked In Chui stupidly, is that so? But that place is full of mountains. Who knows how much time it will take to climb over them? If you want to fight a fast-paced attack, it would be more reliable to take the main road. In Chui, no, this script is too difficult to act. In Chui said, no. I heard that there is a mountain path there that has been in use for many years. It connects Jinmen County and Fenghu County. Scholar. His first reaction was to immediately send people to block the mountain path, but In Chui dampened his enthusiasm. There's not enough time. I reckon that the small city has already been conquered by now. Moreover, there is more than one exit on the mountain path. We can't block it at all. We might even be surrounded by them. The strategy is too risky. The scholar seemed to have grabbed onto the last piece of driftwood. He hurriedly said, please give me a good strategy, master. Previously, the scholar had bossed In Chui around, but now he called him master. In Chui wasn't angry. He put on a professional act and said, although there are several exits on the mountain path, it only connects Jinmen County and Fenghu County. There's no doubt about this. According to the original plan, we only need to send a large number of troops to stall for time. When they can't help but retreat, we'll outflank them from behind and first block their retreat on the mountain path. In this way we'll be able to catch a turtle in a jar and achieve a complete victory. Listening to In Chui describe the blueprint, the scholar's anxious and helpless little heart calmed down. Master, you're very talented. I'll definitely put in a good word for you in front of the chief. When the time comes, a high position and generous salary will be just around the corner. Some people could speak, such as Jiang Pingji. Some people couldn't speak and thought they were very good at it, such as this scholar. If In Chui wasn't acting, he would have been so angry at this person's words that he would have long since ascended to heaven. The scholar first boasted about In Chui, then asked carefully, in your opinion, which county will Lu Shi focus on attacking? Since the mountain path connected Fenghu County and Jinmen County, Lu Shi's goal should be one of these two counties. A 50% chance. Which one was it? In Chui thought about the contents of the script and said, I've carefully thought about the situation on that mountain path. The mountain path to Jinmen County is too long. If a surprise attack is launched, I don't know how much physical strength it will take, and the marching time is too long. The mountain path to Fenghu County is relatively short, and the distance is only half that of Jinmen County. Comparing the two, I conclude that Lu Shi's target must be Fenghu County. The scholar nodded as he listened. Listening to Enchui's words was better than reading for 10 years. After a while he said with emotion, "This Lu Shi is really cunning and black-hearted. Although I'm a native of Qingda County, I didn't know that there was an abandoned mountain path there. It's too remote. If you weren't so talented and familiar with the geography, Lu Shi might have really succeeded. But now, we'll beat him at his own game. We'll capture Lu Shi alive and let him suffer heavy casualties." Enchui's lips revealed a mysterious smile. The scholar also revealed a smile of tacit understanding. The scholar comforted Enchui and turned to claim credit. He copied Enchui's words almost verbatim and suggested to the Red Lotus group leader, "The opportunity doesn't come again. If we can capture Lu Shi now, we will have no more worries. Group leader, for the sake of our grand plan, we must be ruthless." The Red Lotus group leader asked him, "Tell me your opinion." The scholar's expression was slightly ferocious. His tone was light, but his thoughts were very vicious. He said, "Group leader, why don't we transfer the people from Jinmen County to Fenghu County? When Lu Shi can't attack them, we can send people to attack the small town when he's unprepared. Then we can surround the mountain path from behind and catch them like a turtle in a jar. It would be best if we can capture Lu Shi alive. If that doesn't work, we can surround them and slowly torture them to death." Under the shadows, the scholar's face appeared very cold. The Red Lotus group leader thought about it and felt that this was a brilliant plan. "Military counselor, you have a brilliant plan. This time we must make sure that Lu Shi doesn't return." Although the small town was the Red Lotus group sentry post, there weren't many people inside. There were only a few hundred scattered people. They couldn't even organize an effective defense. The highest point of the city wall was only slightly more than 10 feet. Who could be stopped by such a small height? Jiang Pingji held a long spear in her hand and mounted a horse to attack. Little White's strength in trampling people was no less than White's. With a single hoof, the sternum was shattered. She rushed to the front. Yang Xi's eyelids twitched as he watched, afraid that she would be shot by a stray arrow. Chapter 630. Jiang Pingji was dressed in red and silver armor. She was an obvious target in the snow. If the Red Lotus group didn't target her, who else would they target? But for Jiang Pingji, the sparse rain of arrows seemed to have slowed down by dozens of times. She wasn't crippled. Why couldn't she dodge? Realizing that Jiang Pingji was being targeted by arrows, Yang Xi was so frightened that he almost fell off his horse. However, it turned out that Wei Xi was right. Jiang Pingji fought him with 2 legs, 1 hand and 4 fingers. She could crush Yang Xi to death with 1 finger. Watching Jiang Pingji dance the long spear in her hand vigorously, the dense shadows of the spear almost turning into a shield wall. Arrows were deflected by her. Yang Xi's emotions went up and down as he watched. It was as if he was on a roller coaster. Little White galloped forward. As a top-grade steed, it had extremely strong explosive power and endurance. Soon it left the rest of its kind behind. It galloped as fast as silver lightning. The walls of the small city were quickly approaching. Jiang Pingji's target was too obvious. She alone attracted almost all the firepower. Little White galloped in the rain of arrows with her on its back. Occasionally 1 or 2 tricky arrows approached, but Little White could quickly change direction to avoid them. Such a scene almost caused an uproar in the live stream. Their perspective was relatively special. It was similar to a camera hanging above Jiang Pingji's head. As the audience, they could adjust the angle of the camera 360 degrees. They could even zoom in and out. This time the camera gave them a bird's-eye view. Not only could they see Jiang Pingji's back view as she galloped away, but they could also see the way she shot down the arrows. She was so fast that she left afterimages. "Goddess Pingji, hubby, are you riding a tall white horse to marry me? Don't worry, I'll go downstairs and open the door for you. College entrance examination goes smoothly. I can't take it anymore. He's so cool. Can I dump the man next to me and marry the streamer? Good luck tomorrow. Love rival? Let's fight." In order not to affect her mood, Jiang Pingji had long turned off the bullet screen in the live stream. No matter how much the idle audience howled, she couldn't see them for the time being. Relying on Little White's pace, Jiang Pingji easily rushed to the bottom of the city gate. The city wall was only 6 or 7 meters high. How could it stop the combination of Jiang Pingji and Little White? About 30 meters away from the city wall, Jiang Pingji put away her long spear, turned sideways and bent over to avoid the arrows. She raised her hand to draw her longbow and a few arrows. Without looking, she pulled the bowstring to the fullest with her right hand and a few arrows flew out. The dull sound of a sharp weapon piercing through flesh could be heard. Several splatters of blood bloomed. The soldiers of the vanguard battalion had also caught up to support Jiang Pingji. In less than a breath's time she once again shot out several arrows. Every arrow that left the bowstring would definitely take a life. By the time she had shot 4 waves of arrows, Little White had already braked its hooves. Jiang Pingji borrowed the momentum and left the horses back. He took out the long rope from behind his waist and threw the side with the iron hook. It coiled around the wall like a snake. When the Red Lotus group saw the tens of thousands of soldiers below the city walls, they were so scared that their legs turned to jelly. There were only a few hundred members of the Red Lotus group at the sentry post, not even 1,000 of them. Jiang Pingji had always liked a fast-paced attack. She would never give the enemy a chance to catch their breath. After the long rope was wrapped around the wall, her feet firmly stepped on the wall. While pulling the long rope, she tilted her body and kicked her feet to climb up. The city wall was 6 or 7 meters high. Before the Red Lotus group could react, she had already climbed up the city wall. What greeted them was the shiny silver spear in her hand. The soldiers below did not have Jiang Pingji's dashing maneuvers, but with her attracting the enemy's firepower, it was not difficult for them to climb up the city wall. The Red Lotus group naively thought that the small city could stop the advance of Jiang Pingji's army and buy them half a day's time. As it turned out, even the time it took to burn a stick of incense was too long. Faced with Jiang Pingji's menacing army, the Red Lotus group had long been scared to the point of wetting their pants. It had only been a short while, but the commander of the vanguard battalion had already climbed up the city wall and started a massacre on the city wall. She directly crushed their momentum and shattered it like glass shards. Following that, more soldiers climbed up the city wall, each one like wolves and tigers. Before the Red Lotus group could organize an effective defense, everything was over. Before the main army arrived, the small city had already been captured. Their efficiency could be said to be the best in the industry. Yang Xi's expression was complicated. Looking at the open city gate, he finally understood why Jiang Pingji wanted him to lead the vanguard battalion. The soldiers were fierce and the generals were fierce. Only a fierce commander could lead an even more ferocious elite army. Jiang Pingji spoke very little when fighting. She disdained arguing with others. To quote the words of the viewers in the livestream room, "Society is my sister Pingji. She doesn't talk much. She doesn't talk. She directly confronts her." Jiang Pingji asked Yan Yan to lead the vanguard battalion to clean up the battlefield and count the soldiers who had been injured or killed by stray arrows. When the main army arrived, the city gate had already been opened. The arrows under the city wall had also been cleaned up by the soldiers. Except for the bloodstains that had not been cleaned up in time, it was almost impossible to see that a small-scale siege had broken out here. Even though Qiguanrang was prepared, he was still shocked. "Let's rest for a day. At dawn tomorrow we will prepare to enter the mountain road." Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes slightly. She was still dressed in a red and white military uniform. There was not the slightest hint of warmth from before. Instead, there was a chilling, murderous aura. "Looking at the time, I think it's about time," Qiguanrang said. "The mountain road is long. Should we pack lightly?" "Yes." After frowning, Yang Xi suggested, "It's better to bring 2 or 3 days' worth of dry rations. Although the Red Lotus group is just a motley crew, they are not completely brainless. If they attack our grain transport team, although it won't be fatal, it will still cause some trouble." Jiang Pingji sneered. Yang Xi had really overestimated the intelligence of the Red Lotus group. "Yes, let's do as Jing Rong says." Elsewhere, under the suggestion of his trusted scholar, the leader of the Red Lotus group transferred most of the guards in Jinmen County. Now there were only a few thousand troops in the county and they were all old, weak and disabled soldiers. Coupled with the freezing weather, the combat power they could exert was almost zero. And Cui had already made preparations to respond. While contacting his informants, he also instructed the brothers guarding the city of Jinmen County to be alert. After making these preparations, and Cui planned to stir up another wave of trouble. He passed on the scholar's deployment to Jiang Pingji through his informants. When everyone saw it, they were speechless. Yang Si said disdainfully, "Their brains aren't that great, but their hearts are vicious." However, this 007 spy in Cui was very good. His acting skills were off the charts. "Let's act according to plan. First, send scouts into the mountain road. Once they discover that the troops in Jinmen County have withdrawn, report back immediately." In this era, communication was not convenient. If they could make good use of the time difference, they could completely toy with the enemy. She planned to take down Jinmen County as quickly as possible and attack another city before the Red Lotus group could react. Yes, Jiang Pingji's appetite was not just a county. She planned to take down the entire Qingda County in one go. Chapter 631. Qingda County had a total of 4 counties: Jinmen County, Fenghu County, Honglian County, and Chuyu County. If the plan went smoothly, taking down Jinmen County would be as easy as pie. But Jinmen County could not satisfy Jiang Pingji's appetite. Her ambition was far greater than that. "The Red Lotus group thinks that we're beating them at their own game. We might as well imitate them." Qiguan Rang sneered. He loved tricking people. "According to my lord's prediction, how long will it take to take down Jinmen County?" Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes and calculated. "After a while," she said, "although our march is in a hurry and we can't carry siege weapons, it will take at most 2 hours to take down Jinmen County, which is unguarded. If we include the time spent on the mountain road, it will take almost a day. What do you think, Wenjing?" Qiguan Rang held the feather fan that had never left his side and gently waved it. Yang Si, who was beside him, saw it and subconsciously shuddered. He silently shifted his position. He had seen eccentrics and pretentious people, but he had never seen someone waving a fan in the middle of winter. Qiguan Rang said, "According to the information from our informants, the Red Lotus group wants to exterminate us and has formulated a series of measures for this. They've worked so hard. If we don't give them a chance to perform, wouldn't it be too heartless? If the Red Lotus group wanted to trick them, then they could naturally do the same." Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and motioned for Qiguan Rang to continue. He said, "The Red Lotus group thinks that we will attack Fenghu County with a large number of troops. If we don't show up for a long time, I'm afraid it will make them suspicious. Why don't we send some scouts to confuse them and make them think that our intention is Fenghu County, not Jinmen County? We'll delay as much as possible until my lord takes down Jinmen County, then we'll turn around and attack Fenghu County. After all, the mountain road to Fenghu County is very short." Yang Si was a little unhappy when he heard this. "If that's the case, won't we become a tired army? It's on the mountain road again. According to the Red Lotus group's plan, we'll be besieged on the mountain road and it'll be difficult to break through." Dian Yen couldn't help but ask. Realizing that everyone's eyes were on him, he silently shut his mouth. Jiang Pingji tried to smooth things over. She said, "Deputy Diane's words make sense, but if the plan was that simple, it wouldn't be Wenjing." "Sure enough," Qiguan Rang continued, "indeed, in this way we will become a weary army. If we are besieged on the mountain path, I'm afraid we won't be able to escape. However, what if we besiege the Red Lotus group on the mountain path? The situation will be completely different." Dian Yen felt like he was listening to a heavenly book. It was clear that they were the ones being besieged. How had it become the Red Lotus group being besieged? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "According to the Red Lotus group's calculations, aren't they planning to capture the small town, enter the mountain road and surround us from both sides? Since that's the case, why don't we throw out the bait, lure them into the mountain path and then trap them to death?" Dian Yan's brain wasn't quick to react. After thinking for a long time, he suddenly realized that he was pretending to be a pig to eat the tiger. First, they would have the main force attack Jinmen County. At the same time, they would have scouts investigate the vicinity of Fenghu County. This would create the illusion that they intended to attack Fenghu County. Not only would it confuse the Red Lotus group's judgment, but it would also delay them. Once Jinmen County had been captured, they would turn around and return to set up an ambush. Then they would send another team into the mountain road to create the illusion for the Red Lotus group that the main force had already entered the mountain road in the direction of Fenghu County. In reality, they were still hiding on the mountain road to Jinmen County. When the Red Lotus group saw this, They would definitely think that their prey had taken the bait. When they planned to enter the mountain road and cooperate with the troops of Fenghu County to outflank Jiangpingji, the main force of the ambush would appear again. The main force cooperated with the soldiers who had entered the mountain path earlier and worked together to take down this wave of sneak attacks from the enemy. Dian Yen had already shut his mouth obediently. As expected, these scholars were each more heartless than the other. While the others were still at the stage of being unable to resist, they were already thinking about how to counterattack the enemy. Qiguan Rang continued, "This plan isn't difficult, but it's a little harsh. Time is too tight." Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "What's wrong with that? Wenjing, just wait and see how I take down Jinmen County." Yang Si was about to say something sarcastic, but the image of Jiang Pingji taking the lead appeared in his mind at the right time. He also chose to remain silent. Qiguan Rang added, "Jinmen County can be occupied with a surprise strategy, but the effect won't be as great if the same move is used a second time. As for the other 3 counties, in the end we still have to fight with real swords and guns, determine the winner and the loser." Jiang Pingji didn't quite agree with Qiguan Rang's statement. Yang Si's surprise strategy could only be used once, but there was still room for him to make use of it. Once an opportunity was seized, it had to be fully utilized. Jiang Pingji pursed her lips and said, "Because the mountain road is fragile, we can't bring any siege equipment when we attack Jinmen County. However, once we take down Jinmen County, the situation will be different." Before I set off, I privately instructed Xiaoyu to prepare the siege equipment. I asked him to seize the opportunity and transport the equipment to Jinmen County on time. Based on the time spent on the road, Xiaoyu's siege equipment will arrive after we have rested for a day while we counter-encircle the Red Lotus group. While the Red Lotus group is flying around like a headless fly, we'll attack Chuyu County in one go. On the battlefield, one couldn't slack off at all. The opportunity was fleeting and there was no time to lose. Jiang Pingji understood this principle, so she thought about it more thoroughly than anyone else. If they waited until Jinmen County was conquered before informing Su Ku to transport the siege equipment, they would have missed the best opportunity to fight back and forth for a few days. Her combat style was very distinct, fast-paced, and meticulous in her calculations. Others would proceed step by step in an orderly manner. Jiang Pingji, on the other hand, carried out multiple tasks at the same time. She pushed forward from all sides, one step after another, and used this to create a fast-paced sense of tension. In ancient times, communication was inconvenient. Jiang Pingji's combat style was even more urgent, and it could often cause mental oppression to the enemy. This kind of oppression could not only disrupt the enemy's heart, but it could also shake their morale. Everyone was surprised. "After we're done with Jinmen County, we'll attack Chuyu County directly?" Jiang Pingji said. "The troops of 2 counties are concentrated in Fenghu County. Honglian County is the headquarters of the Red Lotus Group, and its defense is not weak. Besides Chuyu County, do we have any other choice? More importantly, the official road from Jinmen County to Chuyu County is flat and wide, and the distance is short, which is conducive to the transportation of siege equipment. With Chuyu County as the target, we can save a lot of time. For a motley crew like the Red Lotus Group, a major defeat could turn them into headless flies flying around aimlessly." Jiang Pingji had to seize the time. Before the Red Lotus Group regained its composure, she had to deliver a series of crazy blows to them. As long as Jinmen County and Chuyu County were stabilized, the Red Lotus Group would not be able to jump around again. Little did she know that En Chui, her teammate who had assisted her in the battle, could bring her another surprise. Night fell and shrouded the earth. A pure white moon hung in the sky. Jiang Pingji was leaning against it and taking a nap when a commotion suddenly came from her mind. Chapter 632. The noisy mechanical voice disturbed her sleep. "Jiang Pingji, bastard Jiang Pingji, don't play dead, I know you're awake. If you have the guts to lock me up, answer me. If you have the guts, answer me. If you continue to pretend to be deaf and dumb, I'll annoy you for the whole night. I'll stop when you're willing to talk to me." The system muttered, and it even started a rhythm. It was difficult for Jiang Pingji to ignore it. She wanted to kill the system. "What are you up to this time?" Jiang Pingji asked in her heart coldly. She got up carefully and did not disturb anyone. She climbed up the city wall. The soldiers were still patrolling and keeping watch. Seeing Jiang Pingji's red and white military uniform, They all perked up and saluted. She waved her hand and said in a low voice, "I just couldn't sleep at night, so I came out for a walk. You guys continue with your work, don't worry about me." The group of patrolling soldiers nodded slightly and moved sideways to avoid Jiang Pingji. She found a secluded corner. The cold night wind blew on her face, dispelling some of her sleepiness. "System, you better give me a reasonable reason. Why are you suddenly disturbing me in the middle of the night? Do you want to die?" The system retorted, "Then why don't you kill one for me to see? Oh, you're fearless." Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes dangerously. The reason why she chose to imprison the system instead of completely destroying it was because she was afraid that the system would find out and alert the enemy. Now it had become the system's capital to play tricks. She could not help but laugh. She did not know what the system was like, but this system TSK, its IQ was really low. Times had changed. Did it think she would always be afraid? Jiang Pingji exhaled a white breath and asked in her heart, "I still want to sleep, I don't want to talk nonsense with you. If you have something to say it quickly. If you continue to be pretentious, you can do whatever you want. Do you think I'll ignore you? That's the world of my brain, you better be clear about it." The system had been imprisoned by Jiang Pingji for almost 2 years. It had developed a subconscious fear of Jiang Pingji. Could not be afraid. Jiang Pingji was a shrewd person. She only provided the system with the points of popularity every day. To the system, popularity points were the energy it needed to survive and grow, similar to the food humans needed. Regardless of whether it was a human or a system, to be imprisoned in a silent world, to be given only the minimum amount of food every day, to ensure that they would not starve to death, and to be imprisoned for 1 to 2 years at a time. If a human were to go crazy, even the system would not be able to handle it. There was a reason for it to cause a ruckus this time. The system stuttered. Can I discuss something with you?" The originally arrogant system was now timid. Jiang Pingji did not know whether to laugh or cry. "System, can you be any more cowardly? Reasonable things can be discussed. If you want me to let you go and give you freedom, you should just give up." The system hurriedly said, No, it's not about that, I mean. Can you restrain yourself a little for now? If it's possible, it's best to lock me up more tightly. It's been a bit special recently. I'm afraid that there might be dimensional merchants patrolling around." "Planar merchants patrolling everywhere?" Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and her expression became solemn. "What do you mean?" The system said, "I don't mean anything. Can you not be so guarded against me? I'm serious this time. Regardless of whether it's you or me, we absolutely cannot be caught by dimensional merchants with patrol orders, or else we're done for. We're now grasshoppers on the same rope. If I'm done for, you won't get any benefits either. If it weren't for Luxi's body, you would have long been expelled and exiled by the rules here." Jiang Pingji snorted softly. "I don't care." None of the federal soldiers were afraid of death. The system was silent for a long time. "You're really annoying. What do I have to do for you to agree?" The system's coquettish grumble made Jiang Pingji frown deeply. "Dimensional merchants with patrol orders? What's that? From what you're saying, you seem to be very afraid." The system said impatiently, "Nonsense, have you ever seen a smuggler who isn't afraid of the police?" Jiang Pingji was speechless. The system said, "I'm the Dimensional Palace Intrigue Streaming System. Opening the streaming channel will temporarily open up a channel between 2 unrelated planes, causing the balance of several planes to be destroyed. That's why there are so-called reborns, or time travelers. Regardless of whether they're time travelers or reborns, they're all illegal immigrants without a license. As for the dimensional merchants with patrol orders, they're existences with licenses that allow them to travel between different planes." Jiang Pingji's interest was piqued and some malice grew in her heart. "If you're caught by them, what will happen to you?" The system sneered, seeing through Jiang Pingji's plan. "Jiang Pingji, I advise you not to have the idea of perishing together with them. Do you know how much energy is needed to open up the barrier between 2 planes? I'm of the same level as that dimensional merchant. If he catches me, he'll lock me up for a few years at most. He can't do anything to me. But you're different. You don't belong to this world. You're an anomaly that affects the original development of this plane. To put it bluntly, you're a pathogen. When the time comes, you'll die a horrible death. You can still live for many years. Isn't it good to be alive? Why must you go against me?" Jiang Pingji wasn't the slightest bit afraid of the system that was outwardly fierce but inwardly weak. She laughed contemptuously, and the disdain in her words was undisguised. Is that so? So you're so powerful. Then why are you imprisoned in my spiritual realm? If the system had an expression, its face would definitely be as black as the bottom of a pot. If it hadn't been careless and Jiang Pingji had deliberately pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger, would it have been caught carelessly? The system had lived for a long time, but it was the first time it had fallen into the hands of its host. Therefore it hated the kind of host that was smart but disobedient the most. Was it not good to be a little naive, a little stupid, and a little smart? Although the host would have to pay some small remuneration, at least the host would be a winner in life while he was alive. Being reborn, wearing the halo of a protagonist, the intelligence of the supporting characters would decrease collectively, and the host would cheat all the way to the peak of life. Wasn't it exciting to think about it? Unfortunately, he met Jiang Pingji, a freak. The system felt wronged and wanted to cry. Jiang Pingji said, "You're full of lies and have too many criminal records. I believe at most 30% of what you say and I'm skeptical of the other 70%. Your ridicule just now gave me inspiration. You said, which smuggler isn't afraid of the police? In that case, the dimensional merchant is the police and you're the smuggler? You also said that you're of the same level as the dimensional merchant, but now you're trapped by me. Hey, there's a lot of information. I seem to know something." The system was faintly flustered. "What do you mean by a lot of information?" Jiang Pingji asked it in return with a natural expression. "Why should I tell you?" "System," Jiang Pingji asked the system, "what does the dimensional merchant look like? Does he have the same heart as you?" The system was almost choked to the point of being speechless. What did she mean by having the same heart as me? Chapter 633. The system was exasperated. Hee, the patrolling merchants are just sanctimonious people. Regardless of whether they are reborn or time travelers, once they are discovered, they will be humanely destroyed. In terms of ruthlessness, they are even more ruthless than me. I will at least let the host die of old age, but he won't. The system tried hard to dispel Jiang Pingji's idea of stirring up trouble. If the system didn't need Jiang Pingji to hide its whereabouts and avoid the patrolling merchants, it wouldn't have revealed so much. It thought that Jiang Pingji would be frightened, but she nodded in agreement. There's nothing wrong with enforcing the law impartially. The system almost couldn't breathe. Who are you on the same boat with now? Don't forget you are also a stowaway. If you are caught, the situation will be very serious. You will be killed and your soul will be destroyed. Fine. I promise you, whether it is me or the main body, we will not do anything to hurt you in the future. Big sister, now is not the time to be willful and mischievous. Jiang Pingji smiled. You and I have formed a temporary alliance, but it will fall apart in the end. This kind of promise is as worthless as toilet paper. If you are sincere, answer my question honestly. Is the main body of the system really in Wang Huiyin's body? Or is the system in her body just a subsystem? Is it just a bait separated from the main body to mess up the world? Answer me, don't hide it. The system was stunned. It said, that's 2 questions. Jiang Pingji snorted. Then answer the first question. Is the system in Wang Huiyin the main body? The system answered very decisively, no. Hearing that, Jiang Pingji's lips curled into a cold and mocking smile. Sure enough, it was not the main body. In this way, she was even more certain of her previous speculation. The main body of the system was really well hidden. It was a pity that she forgot to hide the fox's tail. She was a qualified hunter, but the system was a failed prey. She said meaningfully, I thought my tricks were deep enough. I didn't expect to meet an ancestor who was born to play tricks. However, things like intelligence are destined. No matter how deep the tricks are, people are too stupid. I don't want to know what's wrong with the main body of the system. It cut itself open and divided itself into subsystems, but please don't let it happen to me again. The system secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Since she said that, it should mean that she agreed to cooperate, right? I've answered your question. Are you willing to help me now? Jiang Pingji blinked and said innocently, don't you know that all is fair in war? Making a promise to a gangster leader? The patterns were all broken. An unstamped promise is like a roll of toilet paper to me. I can throw it away after using it. The system, F***ck Jiang Pingji, you're shameless. Jiang Pingji crossed her arms in front of her chest. When will that dimensional patrol merchant arrive? I can report you to him. The system snorted twice. In your dreams. It will take at least 10 years. Don't even think about tricking me. 10 years. That long? Jiang Pingji asked. It's been more than 10 years. Why are you so eager to seek my protection now? Trying to trick me again? The system said in a contemptuous voice. You are a human. How long do you have to live? I'm a system. Time is cheap to me. To you it takes up 1/5 of your life. To me it's only 3 to 5 days or even a few hours. Mortal, don't use your time to measure my time. As an almost eternal existence, you are but a mayfly to me that is born and dead. Tremble, lowly human. Jiang Pingji responded with an, oh. She was not provoked by the system's words. She stabbed back bitterly. Congratulations. Then you can go to prison in 3 to 5 days. I can still be free and unfettered for more than 10 years before I'm destroyed by the dimensional merchant. The system, F***c. Where did the director find such a hateful female protagonist? Jiang Pingji sneered. She buried what happened that night in the bottom of her heart. It did not stir up the slightest ripple. With the system, it seemed that it was not unacceptable for there to be any dimensional patrol merchants. Just as the system said, reborn, or time travelers, were all outsiders who illegally occupied the bodies of the indigenous people. To the local plane they were all pathogens. If there were really rules in the world in order to maintain balance and order, it was natural to eliminate the anomalies. She had nothing to say. What would come would eventually come. Jiang Pingji accepted it calmly. Of course, she would not let her remaining time go to waste just because she was going to die in more than 10 years. On the contrary, she would live a more exciting life. She would live a more passionate and unrestrained life. Even if she had to die, she would let the people of this plane and their descendants remember the name Jiang Pingji thoroughly. Her eyes seemed to be burning with flames. Not only did the system's words not make her restrain herself, but it also stimulated Jiang Pingji's determination to do something big. She felt that unifying the 9 prefectures was not a big deal. It was better to unite the world together. Was it because she had turned this plane upside down and deviated from the trajectory of fate? Would that annoying merchant arrive in advance? If it knew that Jiang Pingji was such a troublemaker who was not afraid of death, the system would have endured it no matter what. Now it was full of regret. As a small subsystem, it could not defeat Jiang Pingji. After being exposed to the night wind for most of the day, Jiang Pingji raised her hand to pat the cold air off her body. She was ready to get up and go back to sleep. On the way, she happened to meet Yang Si, who had woken up at night. Jiang Pingji saw that his eyes were misty and that he was floating as he walked. He yawned all the way. My lord, why did you come out dressed in military attire? Yang Si covered his mouth with his hand so that it would not be too rude to open his mouth while yawning. Jiang Pingji said casually, I had a nightmare and woke up in fright. I was not sleepy at all, so I went out for a walk. Yang Si did not suspect anything and continued to sleep. Tomorrow he would enter the mountain road and attack Jinmen County. After that, there would be a series of high-intensity combat plans. With his weak body, after riding a horse for a few days, he was so tired that he felt like he was falling apart. If he did not seize the time to recover his strength, he was afraid that he would not even be able to climb the mountain road. That would be embarrassing. Jiang Pingji also returned to her original position, crossed her arms and slept. Regardless of whether it was the system or the dimensional merchant, the most important thing now was to take down Jinmen County. She did not care about anything else. However, she really did not expect the system itself to have a brain. Was it dark under the light? It was indeed a trick. She yawned and found a comfortable position. Soon she fell asleep and her breathing became long and steady. The next day the weather was rare. The sky was blue and looked refreshing. The golden sunlight shone on the snow. It was golden and dazzling, so bright that it was a little uncomfortable. Jiang Pingji gathered her troops and horses. She was still dressed in her red and white military attire. She looked energetic and had a high aura. My lord, the situation of the mountain road has been investigated. Last night I also ordered people to quietly sweep away the snow. Now we can pass through. Chapter 634. The mountain path was winding and rugged, and the narrow road stretched as far as the eye could see. Jiang Pingji rode on Little White's back with relative ease. As an excellent descendant of Shalon and the war horses of the northern borderline, Little White's endurance and weight-bearing ability were extremely strong. Every step was steady and easy. In contrast, the others looked a little embarrassed. The mountain path to Jinmen County is already so rugged. I wonder how difficult the road to Fenghu County will be. Yang Si was also secretly complaining. As a counselor, he enjoyed special treatment. Most of the other soldiers walked. He could still ride a horse and did not need to walk on his legs, but the bumpy ride still made him suffer. Jiang Pingji saw that his face was deathly pale with exhaustion that could not be dispelled. She then looked at the purplish-red horse under him, which was panting. She took the initiative to suggest, "Why don't you ride, Little White? Look at you. I think you'll be exhausted before we reach Jinmen County." Yang Si was a little tempted, but when he thought that intelligent horses had a temper, he suddenly became a little timid. "Won't it throw me off the horse?" Yang Si nervously grabbed the reins. If he was not afraid that Little White would be uncomfortable, he would have hugged the horse's neck for safety. Unexpectedly, not only did Little White not throw Yang Si off the horse's back, but it continued to hurry on without complaint. Don't deliberately cause trouble. Little White's temperament is still good. Jiang Pingji changed to Yang Si's previous horse and controlled the horse with the reins. Fortunately, our opponent this time is the Red Lotus group. If it were a smarter enemy, I wouldn't dare to take this mountain path. She looked around at the terrain on the horse's back and teased him with a smile. Taking the mountain path was indeed a strange move. They could avoid the enemy's eyes and ears without being noticed. Whether it was a sneak attack or something else, it had a miraculous effect. However, risks and benefits coexisted. The mountain path was not only suitable for them to sneak attack the enemy, but it was also suitable for the enemy to ambush them. Little White walked very steadily, which was a world of difference from the previous bumpy ride. This made Yang Si feel a little better. He said, "The situation is different. My lord marches at lightning speed. Even if the enemy has the intention to ambush us, they won't be able to make it in time." According to Yang Si's estimation, when they had just captured the small town, the higher-ups of the Red Lotus group had just received news of their arrival. It would take time to transmit the order. By the time they reacted and prepared for an ambush, we would have already passed through the mountain road and taken down Jinmen County. Jiang Pingji fought at a fast pace, but how many people could do that? Most people could only pay attention to one place. By the time they received the news, the best opportunity had already passed. Why were excellent strategists so sought after? It wasn't just because they were able to win a battle from 1,000 miles away in a world where information transmission was lagging behind. More importantly, they were more comprehensive and thoughtful than ordinary people. It was like playing chess. Ordinary people would take one step at a time, but schemers like them would take 10 steps at a time. Just as Yang Si had said, although the mountain road leading to Jinmen County was long, the slope was relatively gentle, and it consumed less energy than expected. Which of Jiang Pingji's soldiers did not train with weights as a daily routine? For an ordinary army, it would take 6 to 8 hours to pass through this mountain path, but for them it would only take a little more than 2 hours. At the same time, the troops of Jinmen County had also been urgently transferred to Fenghu County to defend. The Red Lotus group arranged several scout teams, and sure enough, they found suspicious people. They judged that these were enemy scouts who had attacked the outposts. The scholar clenched his fists nervously. The room was burning with a blazing charcoal fire, and it was so hot that his palms were sweating. Sure enough, Lu Shi's target is Fenghu County. The scholar nervously put his hands behind his back and paced back and forth in the hall, as if he wanted to rub a hole in the ground. He said, "Go and investigate again. Report back quickly if there's anything. If you find Lu Shi's main force, don't act rashly and alert him." Yes. Not long after, a voice came from outside the hall again. The Red Lotus group had found traces of scout activity at the exit of the mountain road in Fenghu County. Every once in a while, someone would come to report back, which made the scholar extremely nervous. Lu Shi had sent a large number of scouts. What did this mean? It meant that the number of troops he had brought was large, and it was very likely that it was more than 10,000. Report, report, report. The messenger kept going back and forth. Every time he received a reply, the scholar's nervousness increased. In the end, he was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. He went out and looked at the sky outside. Flustered and exasperated, he said, "Haven't the reinforcements from Jinmen County arrived yet?" The messenger hung his head and answered timidly, "They're still half a day away." Half a day? So slow. The scholar was angry and anxious. He had never felt that time would pass so slowly. He was like an ant on a hot pan. For him, every minute and every second was torture. Now he only hoped that Lucy would move slowly. It would be best if he could wait for their reinforcements to enter the city before coming. Otherwise, he really did not have the confidence to fight against Jiang Pingji with his current troops. "Where is Mr. N? Quickly invite Mr. N over to discuss countermeasures." Thinking of Enchui, the scholar had a backbone. He hurriedly asked the servant beside him to invite Enchui. The manservant ran as fast as he could, but Enchui was no longer in Jinmen County. "Do you know where Mr. N went?" The scholar did not feel that anything was wrong. Although Enchui had left, his brothers who were close to him were still there. The scholar did not suspect anything. The servant replied, "I've asked carefully. Mr. N seems to have gone to Honglian County overnight." The scholar frowned. He did not understand why Enchui had gone to Honglian County at this time. However, he did not dwell on this issue for too long, because another messenger had found traces of scouts. What made the scholar even more terrified was that the scouts were getting closer and closer to Jinmen County. In other words, when these scouts had finished investigating the situation, Lu Shi's main force would attack. Thinking of the reinforcements that would arrive in half a day, the scholar wanted to grab his hair in frustration. Because the scouts were moving around frequently and spying on their situation, the scholar had never thought that this was just bait set up by Jiang Pingji. Qiguan Rang was in charge of the Central Army. Under his arrangements, scouts were sent out to scare and tease the Red Lotus group. As for the main force, at this moment they had already passed through the mountain road and crossed a vast expanse of white snow, galloping toward Jinmen County. Qingda County belonged to the northern region. The snow was heavy in winter. Except for the official road, no one cleared the snow in other places. Usually they waited for the weather to warm up and let it melt on its own. Jiang Pingji had already asked the people of the Vanguard Battalion to prepare plain-colored linen and draped it over their bodies as cover. The weather was good that day. The snow reflected the light. In order not to hurt their eyes, the guards at the city gate would not stare at the snow outside the city for a long time. The garrison of Jinmen County was almost completely transferred away. Only 3,000 old, weak and disabled soldiers were left behind. The sun was shining brightly and the reflection made their eyes very uncomfortable. Outside it was freezing cold. There were only a few Red Lotus group on the city wall who were seriously guarding. Chapter 635. Gaokao Yila. Streamer, do you want to cover your eyes with a coarse cloth to block the light? So annoying. In ancient times there were no sunglasses or protective glasses. The ultraviolet rays reflected from the snow will harm the eyes. It's easy to get snow blindness. Little angels, if the person above didn't remind me, I would have forgotten about this. You must be careful of snow blindness. Let's get together, please, we're at war now. Whether we can survive is still a problem. What's a pair of eyes worth? Jiang Pingji turned off the bullet screen in the streaming room and turned the screen to the smallest size to avoid distraction. Dian Yan was beside her. Because he was nervous, his voice sounded a little rough. My lord, could it be a trap? He saw that there were only a few soldiers on the city gate. They were too lax. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, Do you think everyone is like me, your lord? When I run the army, I issue orders repeatedly. Those who disobey will be dealt with according to military law. Those who slack and play tricks have to think twice. The Red Lotus group is different. Discipline is lax. Now that most of the elites have been transferred away, the remaining people think that they have nothing to worry about. Naturally, they won't take extra precautions. Such a cold day. Who wants to be cold? They'll slack if they can. If the guards on the city gate assumed a solemn stance, Jiang Pingji would be worried that there would be an ambush. Dian Yan nodded thoughtfully. Looking at the city gate, Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes dangerously. She said, I really don't like this city gate. Dian Yan didn't understand. Weren't all the city gates the same? Why was there one that didn't like it? Jiang Pingji said, Dian Yan, lead the soldiers to cover me. Now we have to break into the city as fast as possible. I have a good idea. Dian Yan didn't ask what Jiang Pingji's idea was. He only needed to do what he was supposed to do. My lord, please rest assured. Jiang Pingji nodded. She looked down at the long spear in her hand. It was too thin and too long. She turned her head to look at Dian Yan's waist. She reached out and said, lend me your 2 big axes. Dian Yan was tall and strong. He had great strength. He especially liked to use such heavy weapons during battles. With one swing of the axe he could split a person from the top of his skull to his pelvis. The scene was bloody and violent. Every time he came back from a battle he looked like he had been fished out from a pool of blood. Hearing that Jiang Pingji wanted to borrow his weapon, it wasn't that Dian Yan was unwilling but, my lord, these 2 axes are too heavy, I'm afraid. Dian Yan had not finished his words when his eyes widened so much that they were about to pop out. The 2 axes were specially made and weighed nearly 50 kilograms, but they were as light as goose feathers in Jiang Pingji's hands. He did not seem to be straining at all. Every time Dian Yan thought he had a good understanding of his lord's combat abilities, she would always be able to break his record. The weight is quite comfortable, she pondered for a moment, then her lips curled into a faint smile. She looked at the city gate with malice and interest. At that moment, seeing Jiang Pingji holding 2 axes in her hands, the audience in the streaming room was stirred up again, and the bullet screen was filled with comments. Kola. Yesterday I saw a young general in red and silver armor, and today it's a lowly with 2 axes? Lao Ciji Lianming. The host's body is already 17 or 18 years old. Lolita? Have you ever seen such an old Lolita? In Yueja Zhugachinmal. There's nothing wrong with an old lowly. Gui Kai Guofengxiu. I've already moved the bench and melon seeds and drinks. I'm sitting down to watch the host's heroic battle. Boss Chow. The commenter above, you really have a heavy taste. People will really die when the host goes to war. Faced with bloody corpses, large and small intestines flowing out of the abdominal cavity, spleens, accumulated feces and crushed brains, are you sure you can eat melon seeds and drinks? Thinking of Boss Chow's bullet screen, a similar scene involuntarily appeared in his mind and he almost vomited. Jiang Pingji really wanted to cause trouble. At present, it was not clear about the specific garrison situation in Jinmen district, so Jiang Pingji did not dare to be careless. In order to end the battle quickly, she could only choose to explode and shatter the Red Lotus Group's momentum with a thunderous attack. She would use the fastest speed to take down Jinmen district. In this way she had to cause trouble. Yang Si, who was protected at the back, looked in the direction of the city gate from afar. He did not know whether Jiang Pingji would directly set up a battle formation to attack or launch a sneak attack. He pondered in his heart. There was already movement from the soldiers in front. What does my lord want to do? Yang Si almost screamed because he saw Jiang Pingji turn over and get on Little White's back. A row of soldiers advanced in an orderly manner. Because of the snow, the sunlight and the white cloth draped over Jiang Pingji's body, the soldiers on the city gate did not immediately discover her traces. The soldiers of the Red Lotus group hid under the pilasters to take shelter from the wind. Their clothes were not uniform. Some of them wore very thick clothes while others were very thin. They curled up and shivered with their backs straight. The only thing they had in common was that they were all older, and their physical strength was not as good as that of the younger generation. Oh my God, it's so cold. He opened his mouth and exhaled a breath of white air. The hot air that he had painstakingly held back escaped again. Stop talking. The more you talk, the colder it gets. If you have the energy to talk, why don't you shake a little more? If you can't do it, pray to the gods. I think it's a little useful. In this era, ordinary people relied on walking to get around. Did they rely on shaking to keep warm? As for hot water pots, they did not exist. They were just a group of old, weak and disabled soldiers. It was good enough that they could survive in this world. How could they dare to ask for more? The veterans, guarding the city gate, huddled together to keep warm. They barely had some warmth. In a world of ice and snow, they did not have enough clothes to keep out the cold. When guarding the city during the day, they just sent 1 or 2 people to stand guard. The others huddled under the pilasters to take shelter from the wind. They huddled together to keep warm. When the people on guard could not stand it anymore, they would take turns to do it. At this time someone complained, I wasn't on duty today. I really don't know what's gotten into the higher-ups. They transferred everyone away and made me the scapegoat. You're not the only one who's unlucky. Stop talking. It's the chief's order to transfer people away. They've gone to eradicate the heretics. Heretics? Who's the heretic? Who else can it be? Lucy from next door. If the gods say he's a heretic, then he's a heretic, a demon who brings disaster to the world. Lucy? Almost everyone in the north knew this name. It was the same for the people of Qingda County. Most of them made a living by mining coal, but in the current world the people could not even afford food. Who would buy coal? No one bought coal, which meant that many people who dug coal for a living would lose their livelihood. They could not even feed their families. In the past 2 years, Jiang Pingji had repeatedly purchased large amounts of coal from Qingda County. When the Red Lotus Group and Jiang Pingji had not completely fallen out, she had taken care of the business in Qingda County and provided for many people. As for the topic of heretics and demons, most people agreed with the crusade. Only a small group of people remained silent. At this time, someone looked up at the sky and found many dark spots in the sky. He raised his hand and pointed. What's that? Chapter 636. Enemy attack. Enemy. A wave of arrows fell from the sky and landed behind the battlements. The voices of the gate guards stopped abruptly, and they let out a soft whimper. Their half-standing bodies collapsed with a loud crash, but the rain of arrows was still falling. Soon the fallen corpses were pierced into hedgehogs. Dark red blood flowed out of their bodies and seeped into the stone bricks of the city wall, dampening the ground. A nauseating sweet and fishy smell filled the air. After the first wave of arrows, everyone, regardless of whether they were standing or sitting on the ground, was on high alert. How was this possible? Why were there enemies? Someone was shot in the arm by an arrow. He clung tightly to the base of the battlements, holding a wooden shield in his hand, and quietly poked his head out. It would have been better if they hadn't seen it, but once they saw it, they were almost scared out of their wits. Beads of cold sweat broke out on their backs. The snow under the city wall was thick. At first glance, it seemed nothing, but when they looked closely, they could see something wriggling quickly on the snow, like a swarm of ants surging toward the city wall. When they got closer and looked again, it was clear that there were countless enemies. Who were they? Where did they come from? The rain of arrows continued to fall from the sky. The Red Lotus Group was scared out of their wits. They didn't even realize that the enemies under the city wall didn't carry any siege equipment. As long as they defended against the rain of arrows and organized a wave of counterattacks, they might be able to survive a little longer. However, they were already stunned by this sudden wave of attacks. Not to mention organizing a counterattack, it was already good enough that no one stepped on them. Some soldiers hurriedly picked up the weapons that had been placed aside and tried to shoot arrows down the city wall. More people covered their heads and scurried away. Dian Yan watched Jiang Pingji ride away and secretly gritted his teeth. He ordered the soldiers to continue advancing down the city wall while continuing to shoot arrows. Cover the Lord. Yang Si, who was at the back, saw Jiang Pingji's figure that had shrunk to a small dot. He was so scared that he almost fell into the snow. Even if she was the commander of the vanguard battalion, who would act so willfully and recklessly like her? Yang Si's heart was in his throat. He almost forgot how to breathe. He stared ahead without blinking. Even though his eyes were a little sore from staring, he still didn't dare to blink. He was afraid that Jiang Pingji would die on the battlefield in the blink of an eye. The current situation was much more thrilling than yesterday's skirmish. Just the height of the two city walls was not on the same level. Yesterday the small city was only slightly more than 20 feet high. His lord could climb the city wall with her coquettish movements. What about today? How was the lord going to get up the city wall that was 30 feet high? Jiang Pingji had only climbed halfway. Perhaps she would be shot into a hedgehog by the Red Lotus Group on the city wall. At this moment he finally understood Wei Si's sadness. With such a carefree and worrisome lord, the officials were either worried sick or scared out of their wits. Yang Si felt that his lifespan would be halved if he were to go through 2 more rounds like this. It would be difficult for him to die of old age. The viewers in the live stream also felt the same thrill as him. Yang Si was holding the line at the rear. His eyesight was limited and he could only see Jiang Pingji's figure turning into a blurry red and white dove. However, it was different for the audience in the streaming room. Their perspective followed Jiang Pingji's movements. How could that feeling be described as pleasurable? It was even more exciting than watching a 3D movie. If their faces were closer to the screen, it felt like those arrows would fly out of the screen and pierce through their brains. Jintian Changsho, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Streamer, be careful. Cheongda Jibukeguo. F*ck that arrow just now was too thrilling. If it wasn't for the streamer's quick reaction, wouldn't her body have been pierced? I still need to work hard this month. I'm trembling. Even time travel is so dangerous now. Henceforth Tian Sigging. I'm scared to death. I estimate that pair of broad axes must weigh more than 50 kilograms, right? How strong is the streamer? She looks so relaxed. If it wasn't for the fact that it's impossible for the streaming room to be fake, I would have thought that they're imitations. The viewers couldn't be blamed for their doubts. Jiang Pingji could wield the spear so fast that it left afterimages, but it was too much for her to wield a pair of long axes so fast that they left afterimages. Fortunately, Jiang Pingji had already turned off the bullet screen. Otherwise, the overwhelming and colorful bullet screen would have drowned her vision. With Dian Yen supporting her from the rear, there were very few arrows that flew down from the city wall. Relying on Little White's speed and explosive power, Jiang Pingji seemed to be in danger, but in fact she perfectly avoided all the cold arrows with hidden killing intent. She approached the city wall without any danger. Yangxi was so anxious that he gritted his teeth. The height of the city wall of Jinmen County was different from that of the small town yesterday. How could she climb up? In his anxiety, Yangxi unconsciously clenched his fists. His nails were deeply embedded into his flesh, leaving a few nail marks on his palm. Compared to his worries, the viewers in the streaming room were mostly watching the show. Zwizhen Beishijing. It's coming, it's coming. The streamer's ultimate skill of jumping on the wall in the air. Don't blink. Qingshan Weishue Bai 2. Streamer, begin your performance. However, to everyone's surprise, Jiang Pingji didn't pull out a rope or anything else at all. She was less than 20 meters away from the city gate. The muscles in her right arm suddenly swelled and accumulated strength. Her arm was bent like a bow and the handle of the axe was thrown out by her. Her calm face had a hint of ferocity. In the next moment, a loud rumbling sound came from the city gate. The long axe was deeply embedded in the city gate. The entire body of the axe was completely submerged. Like a spider web, cracks spread in all directions with the long axe as the center, and a thin layer of ash spread out. The entire city gate trembled. She threw it with too much strength. Little White raised its hooves high. Its body was almost perpendicular to the ground. It looked up to the sky and let out a roar. Jiang Pingji had expected this. She tightened her grip on the horse's belly and grabbed the reins with the other hand. It was steady and steady. It had no intention of being thrown off. Little White took advantage of this to offset the force of its forward charge. Its raised hooves fell heavily again. In an instant the entire streaming room was quiet. There was a momentary vacuum in the bullet screen. Jiang Pingji's chest rose and fell violently. Her fair cheeks were a little flushed. She raised another long axe high and shouted loudly. Everyone attack! Defeat them! Dian Yen held back the surging blood in his chest and ordered, attack the city. At his command, the soldiers quickened their pace, and the rain of arrows became more concentrated. In Jinmen County, the Red Lotus Group members who stayed behind to guard the city were already panicking and at a loss when they received the news that the enemy was attacking the city. Guard the city gate, we can't let them in. A member of the Red Lotus Group roared. Only then did the panicking Red Lotus army calm down a little and mechanically defend the city gate. As long as they held the city gate and resisted the enemies outside, they might be able to wait for reinforcements. That was what many people thought. Dozens of soldiers blocked the city gate, for fear that Jiang Pingji would use the siege logs to hit the city gate. In fact, apart from weapons, Jiang Pingji did not carry any siege or defense equipment. She herself was the strongest siege murderous aura. The people of the Red Lotus Group were terrified when they saw the shiny axe piercing through the top of the city gate. However, in the next instant an even more horrifying scene occurred. Chapter 637. Dozens of members of the Red Lotus Group desperately pressed against the city wall. Because of the commotion caused by the axe, the skin of the wall and sand fell from above their heads. Now that the weather was freezing, they couldn't exert their full strength at all. They pressed against the city wall with both hands, feeling as if they were touching a large block of ice. "Hold on a little longer, we can't let the thieves outside rush in." As soon as the voice of the small leader fell, dozens of people felt an unparalleled force coming from the city gate. It was as if a mountain was collapsing and pressing down on them. In the next moment, the city gate, which already had huge cracks on it, suddenly opened wide with a bang. The people behind the city gate squeezed together, almost having the illusion that their intestines had been squeezed out of their throats. One by one they fell down. Before they could react, a snow-white figure galloped past like lightning, accompanied by the clattering of hooves. A gust of wind blew past. With a slash of the long axe, a head flew up, leaving behind a corpse whose body temperature had not yet dropped. As Jiang Pingji rushed into the city gate, the soldiers behind her were greatly encouraged. Their morale rose again and again, and their battle cries shook the heavens. Dian Yen didn't have the two long axes that he carried with him, so he randomly found a spear to replace them. He led the soldiers and rushed into the city wall with Jiang Pingji. Yang Si felt as if he had just taken the steepest roller coaster and was forced to bungee jump. His heart was thumping violently. When he heard the soldiers beside him ask him if they should coordinate with the attack, Yang Si trembled violently and his mind became clear. "Charge. Coordinate with the Lord." Yang Si excitedly pulled out the scholar's sword that was used as a decoration at his waist. He was so excited that he almost bit his tongue. The city gate had been breached. The members of the Red Lotus group who were resisting at the city gate were all killed by Dian Yen, who rushed in after them. The reinforcements who rushed over were no match for them at all. They were completely crushed almost immediately. At one point, there was only the sound of fighting and the scene of blood splattering. Jiang Pingji rode on the back of the little white horse. Not only was she fast, but the long axe in her hand was like the sole hook axe in the hands of the King of Hell. With one swing of the axe, very few people died with a whole corpse. Even if they didn't die, Little White would follow up with a hoof and crush their sternum. Those who died on the spot were too numerous to count. Little White rarely cooperated with Jiang Pingji, but it was full of intelligence. Its performance was not any weaker than White's. It was not the slightest bit timid and shy like it usually was. It stepped on people cleanly and efficiently. If someone tried to raise their hand to stop it, it would crush their arm and sternum together. The soldiers of the Red Lotus group in Jinmen County were utterly defeated. They fled in all directions like headless flies. Some people had even just gotten out of bed, their eyes wide open. They couldn't believe that Jinmen County had changed hands so easily. "Why is it so noisy outside?" someone asked doubtfully. After the military forces in Jinmen County had been transferred away, the number of people had decreased by a lot. Now that it was winter, the people were unwilling to go out, so the streets were quiet. Now that it had suddenly become lively, the bustling noise was astonishing. However, when he listened carefully, he realized that something was wrong. How was that the sound of excitement and jubilation? It was clearly the sound of shouting to kill, beating and howling like wolves. Is there a war outside? Can't you let people sleep? What's with all the noise? Some people with bad tempers began to roar at the source of the noise. Seeing that it was not working, they went straight back to the house with their kitchen knives in an attempt to intimidate the people. However, before they could step out of the fence, a man covered in blood rushed in from the corner of the street and fell to the ground, forming a pool of blood. Seeing this scene, the man was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He fell to the ground, trembling, then turned around and crawled back into the house. It was so scary. They attacked all the way to the center of Jinmen County with irresistible force. Everywhere they passed, there was almost no resistance. The soldiers on Jiang Pingji's side were all well trained. They trained continuously throughout the year. Large-scale training was concentrated in midsummer and cold winter. They wore the same armor and held standard weapons. They cooperated with each other in combat, forming groups of 3 to 5 people. On the other hand, the Red Lotus group was full of people dressed in rags. Just the weather alone could defeat them, let alone the others. It was difficult for the old, weak, sick and disabled to move. How could they pick up weapons and fight against the enemy? The other members of the Red Lotus group who had rushed over after hearing the noise were so scared that their legs turned to jelly. They could not summon the slightest will to fight. They laid down their weapons and surrendered, their faces ashen. Many people did not even know that Jinmen County had changed hands overnight. If the streets had not been cleaned of blood and broken limbs, who would have thought that a siege had broken out in the seemingly peaceful Jinmen County not long ago? Yang Si could not think of another word to describe this battle other than fast. The soldiers strangled the enemy and defeated the momentum of the Red Lotus Group's garrison, making them unable to summon the will to fight. Then they shouted that those who surrendered would not be killed. Jiang Pingji was a warlike person, but she was not a murderous person. Enemies who no longer had the will to fight were not worth her killing at all. She shook off the blood and minced meat on the axe and turned over to dismount. Little White, well done. I'll get someone to prepare the best food for you when we get back. Jiang Pingji stroked Little White's mane. It snorted and rubbed against her palm, acting like a spoiled child in a docile manner. Because of Jiang Pingji's violent opening of the way, Little White's snow-white fur had been dyed scarlet, which added a bit of heroic spirit. Yang Si laid out the layout and commanded. Dian Yen cleaned up the stubborn enemies and captives. Jiang Pingji also charged in the middle of the vanguard battalion. When the sun rose above their heads, it was already noon. Jiang Pingji leaned against Little White's side. She raised her hand and twisted the sleeves and hem of her clothes under her armor. Thick blood was squeezed out and dripped to the ground. It was clearly a bloody, terrifying and horrifying scene, but she did it very naturally, as if she was wringing rainwater instead of human blood. "Pai Lord." A call came from afar. Jiang Pingji looked up and saw Yang Si stagger and fall off the back of the date red horse. Jiang Pingji glanced at the scholar's sword at Yang Si's waist. It was originally only used for decoration, a good-looking ornament, but at that moment, it was permeated with the smell of blood. It was obvious that it had also seen blood. When she looked at Yang Si's face, which contained hidden excitement, her expression softened a little. "Are you okay? The battlefield is too chaotic. How dare you run around?" Yang Si's job was mental work. The fighting and killing could be left to the martial arts. If anything happened to Yang Si, the team, which was already short of people, would be even more lacking. Jinmen District had already been conquered. There would be many things to be busy with in the future. They could not afford to lose manpower at this time. Yang Si did not know Jiang Pingji's thoughts. He thought that she was concerned about him, and his heart suddenly warmed up. Just now he called her Lord willingly. "Thank you for your concern, my lord. I'm fine." Other than the pain in his thighs from riding the horse, he was fine. He had also experienced the addiction of charging and breaking through enemy lines. The gentleman's martial arts that he had learned in the past were not useless. Jiang Pingji's voice was calm. "Has the battlefield been cleaned up? How many wounded are there? How many captives? Did anyone take the opportunity to cause trouble?" Chapter 638. Jiang Pingji's side had the upper hand, but as the attacking party without any siege equipment, it was already very good to have such an outcome. She said, "Now that the weather is cold, the corpses won't rot easily. Collect the corpses of the soldiers and send them back." According to the customs of war, the corpses of soldiers were usually disposed of on the spot. Firstly, there were too many corpses and it was not easy to move them. Secondly, the weather was not good, so it was difficult to preserve the corpses. There were many accidents during the march, so it was inconvenient to bring the corpses along. However, the weather was cold and the corpses would not rot so easily. Jiang Pingji planned to send them back to their hometown instead of burying them in a foreign land. Yang Si's eyes widened slightly, as if he was surprised by Jiang Pingji's decision. After a while he said in a low voice, "Yes." The situation in Jinmen District was far poorer than Jiang Pingji had imagined. The houses were dilapidated and low, and the doors of every household were tightly shut. Occasionally there would be people looking out through the crack in the door. If Jiang Pingji's gaze swept over them, they would immediately shrink their heads back. Jiang Pingji formulated a strict military order. The troops were not allowed to disturb the people during battles. If they violated the order, they would be punished according to military law. Let the soldiers rest for a while, eat something and recover their strength. We will go back and act according to plan. Jiang Pingji heaved a sigh of relief and thought about the battle plan she had formulated. Yang Si nodded and passed the order on behalf of Jiang Pingji. The vanguard battalion was the most elite part of the entire team, But Jinmen district had just been captured, so it was impossible to leave anyone to defend it. Therefore, before they set off, Jiang Pingji had informed Qiguanrang and asked him to deploy more than 1,000 troops from the main army to temporarily take over Jinmen district. According to her calculations, they would be able to make it in time after they nibbled away at the Red Lotus Group's ambush and turned to Jinmen County. The Red Lotus Group's news was lagging behind, and it would take a long time for it to be transmitted. When the time came, they wanted to send troops back to Jinmen district. Not only had Su Ke's siege equipment arrived, but Jiang Pingji had also arrived at their destination with the vanguard battalion. If the Red Lotus Group wanted to attack Jinmen County, which was at its peak, they would definitely need to pile up their heads. After resting for about 4 hours, the soldiers sent by Qiguanrang arrived. Jiang Pingji took 2 bites of her rations and drank some warm water. She mounted Little White's horse and waved her arms. "Depart." Behind him, Jinmen County crawled on the ground like a giant sleeping beast, gradually disappearing into the horizon. According to the battle plan, Jiang Pingji would lead her people to hide on the mountain road leading to Jinmen County. On the other side, the troops that had been transferred from Jinmen County finally arrived at Fenghu County after some twists and turns. The strategist of the Red Lotus Group, the scholar, was almost moved to tears. Qiguanrang provoked and threatened him again and again. The scholar always thought that he would receive news of Jiang Pingji attacking the city in the next second. He wanted to capture the scouts on Jiang Pingji's side and kill one as a warning to the others to boost their morale. However, the scouts were cunning and slippery like loaches. He could only find traces of them, but he couldn't catch them. This made the scholar angry. But now all the troops from Jinmen County had arrived. How could the combined forces of the 2 counties not be able to hold back Lu Shi? The scholar felt a sense of security and all of his uneasiness was dispelled. Lu Shi has gone too far. We must teach him a lesson and let him know how powerful our sacred group is. The scholar secretly clenched his teeth. The plan to outflank Lu Shi that he had previously come up with once again occupied his mind. He was very tempted. He had been frightened by the scouts for so long. Now that he had the upper hand, how could he not think of a way to get back at Lu Shi and make him lose face? Thinking of this, the scholar began to deploy troops. He dispatched more than 3,000 people to prepare a sneak attack on the small town and ambush Jiang Pingji. In the Red Lotus Group, the scholar had great authority. Almost no one except the leader could order him to withdraw the plan. However, the leader of the Red Lotus Group, who had led the troops from Jinmen County to support them, was dissatisfied. The leader said, "Counselor, our army has traveled all the way from Jinmen County to Fenghu County. The people are extremely tired. Why don't we give them some time to rest and reorganize?" At the mention of this, the scholar was instantly infuriated. He said righteously and sternly, "Speed is the most important thing in war and opportunities are fleeting. If we delay opportunities for you and give Lu Shi a chance to catch his breath, should I bear the responsibility or should you? What's more, from Jinmen County to Fenghu County, you took the official road. The road is flat. How much physical strength can you waste? I haven't even held you accountable for the crime of slow support, which almost gave Lu Shi an opportunity to take advantage of. If he hadn't been so good at hiding the truth, Lu Shi might have already known that Fenghu County's troops were insufficient. What if they attacked the city before Jinmen County's reinforcements arrived? It was already good enough that the scholar didn't hold the leader accountable, but he still wanted to rest and reorganize and delay opportunities. After hearing this, the leader's face turned from white to green, and the anger in his heart burned. If it weren't for his fear of the scholar's position in the Red Lotus Group, he would have slapped him. Who gave him the courage to embarrass himself? The scholar said arbitrarily, "Gather the troops, suppress Lu Shi and restore the prestige of our sacred group." The scholar said arbitrarily, "Gather the troops, suppress Lu Shi and restore the prestige of our sacred group." They dreamed of annihilating Jiang Pingji and achieving great achievements. Little did they know that there were already several traps waiting for them ahead. After capturing Jinmen County, Jiang Pingji ordered the messenger to pass the news to Qiguanrang, who was in charge of the central army. "I know about this. Inform the Lord and act according to the plan." When Qiguanrang heard that Jinmen County had been captured and that the vanguard battalion led by Jiang Pingji had set off after a short rest, he felt reassured. At this time, the scouts at the front also sent back information one after another. The troops of Jinmen County had arrived at Fenghu County. Qiguan Rang raised his eyebrows and ordered the scouts to probe again. If there are signs of troops being deployed out of the city in Fenghu County, immediately report back and inform all the scouts to return. Not long after, Qiguan Rang received news from the scouts that there was movement in Fenghu County. He raised his eyebrows and sneered coldly. The strategists guarding Fenghu County were really brainless. However, it was also thanks to the other party's lack of brains. If they had brains, they would only need to delay for one more day before they would receive the news that Jinmen County had been lost. By then they would know that all of this was a scheme and they would be more cautious in their actions. They might even be able to reduce their losses. It was a pity that they only knew how to talk on paper and thought that the war would develop according to their expectations. Little did they know that daydreaming was beautiful, but Jiang Pingji's efficiency in war was too high. Before nightfall, Qiguan Rang retreated from the small town with his men and entered the mountain road leading to Fenghu County. He used himself as bait and pretended to attack. The scouts of the Red Lotus group, who were keeping a close eye on the movements in the small town, hurriedly passed the news back. When the scholar received the news, he was ecstatic. The heavens are helping me. This time I must make Thief Lu suffer a loss. Whoever can capture Thief Lu alive will be rewarded with 1,000 taels and countless beauties. According to the scholar's script, the Red Lotus group would send heavy troops to block several exits on the mountain road and send 3,000 members out of the town to sneak in through the mountain road entrance to block Jiang Pingji's retreat. They would attack from the front and the back, besiege Jiang Pingji on the mountain road and finally capture her alive. Chapter 639. The scholar's script was indeed perfect, but unfortunately he had taken the wrong one. A cannon fodder with a low IQ wanted to enjoy the treatment of a protagonist? When the sky gradually darkened, all was silent except for the whistling of the mountain wind. Qiguan Rang, who had already led his men into the mountain road, looked at the topographic map and pointed to a mountain wall. "It's here." As soon as he finished speaking, the soldiers behind him piled up the boulders that had already been found there, blocking the road to Fenghu County. He did this because he was worried that the Red Lotus group would split their troops into two groups, one from the exit and the other from the entrance. Now Qiguan Rang had blocked the road to the exit and was relying on this to block the ambush on the road leading to the exit. He wanted to see who was the turtle that was caught in the urn. With the efforts of the soldiers, a stone wall had been piled up inside the mountain road in less than an hour. Qiguan Rang ordered the soldiers to rest in batches and recuperate. Once there was a situation, they would immediately beat the military drum to alert. In the middle of the night, the moon in the sky emitted a cold light, and the air was bitterly cold. The temperature at night was lower than during the day, and the members of the Red Lotus group were poor people. The proportion of people with night blindness was very high. At night they were like blind people. Cold and blind, how could they fight this battle? They were unwilling to launch a sneak attack at night. However, the scholar was radical and would use force. If they did not obey, they would be punished by military law. Everyone had no choice but to obey. The 3,000 troops sent by the Red Lotus group arrived in the small town and were preparing to launch a sneak attack, but they found that it was empty. The leader of the troops was uneasy, fearing that this was a trap. However, this could also be Lu Shi's evil plan. Perhaps Lu Shi wanted to sneak attack Fenghu County at night, but he didn't expect that they would stumble upon his plot by accident. When the two speculations were put together, the Red Lotus group would naturally choose the one that was beneficial to them. So, the leader of the troops was so shocked that he slapped his thigh and suddenly realized, it must be Lu Shi who wants to attack the city at night. The lackey beside him said flatteringly, it must be so. It's just that Lu Shi is ignorant and stupid. He doesn't know that our sacred group is blessed by the gods and that all crises can be easily solved. Lu Shi is just a mortal. How can he be compared with the heavenly soldiers and generals of the sacred group? With the lackey's words, the leader was in a good position. His face darkened as he said, chase after him. Capture that traitor Lu alive. Little did they know, a pair of black and bright eyes were hiding under the cover of the night, quietly watching them. The scouts found out that Jiang Pingji was lying in ambush on the other side of the mountain path. My lord, they have already entered the mountain path. Jiang Pingji held a blade of withered grass in her mouth and fed Little White with a basin in her other hand. The surrounding soldiers were taking turns to rest and recuperate. Only when they had enough strength and energy would they be able to fight. The mountain path was very windy and the temperature was very low. Their warm clothes were somewhat useless, so they could only huddle together to keep warm. Although it was somewhat miserable compared to the Red Lotus group, it was still extremely good treatment. Hearing the news from the scouts, she nodded and ordered her men to gather all the soldiers. Dian Yan was swift and decisive. He carried out Jiang Pingji's orders without any hesitation. The situation on Jiang Pingji's side was far better than that of the Red Lotus group. The mountain path was rugged and long. When the majority of the troops had entered the mountain path, the leader of the Red Lotus group ordered torches to be lit. According to the script, they had already blocked the exit and entrance of the mountain path. Now that they had lit the torches, they were not afraid of being discovered by Jiang Pingji. So what if they found out? There was no way out in front and no way out behind. Thief Lu could not escape even if he grew wings. With the light and warmth of the torches, the Red Lotus group advanced more smoothly. Their speed had also increased by a large margin. Qiguan Rang had long been prepared. He placed a man at a certain distance. Qiguan Rang didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he learned that the Red Lotus group was using torches to illuminate the area. The other side was truly fearless. Did they really think that they could eat them up? Aren't you afraid of choking to death? The mountain road was narrow and could only allow 2 carriages to travel side by side. If the Red Lotus group had caught them off guard, they might have suffered losses. Now that they had brazenly lit their torches, it was obvious that they were telling the enemies who had been ambushed, "Little ones, I'm coming." He wasn't sick, but there was a hole in his brain. A sneak attack should have the quality of a sneak attack. Qiguan Rang ordered, "Order all battalions to prepare to defend against the enemy." The mountain road was narrow, and the advantage in numbers was not of much use. Qiguan Rang was in charge of the main army. As the lieutenant of the right army, Li Yun's main responsibility was to protect the main army and coordinate with the vanguard battalion. Jiang Pingji and Dian Yan were in the vanguard battalion, so Li Yun was left behind to assist the main army. Upon receiving Qiguan Rang's order, he had a few rows of soldiers hold shields and form the first line of defense to prevent the Red Lotus group from using long-range arrows to injure people. Then the crossbowmen would shoot from behind to block the fiercest wave of sneak attacks. If the enemy used the tactic of corpses to break through this line of defense, or if they ran out of arrows, there would be soldiers armed with long spears to fill in the gaps. This would buy time and ensure that the main army's line of defense would not be broken. The mountain road was special. Many large pieces of equipment could not be brought along. They could only rely on the cooperation between different types of soldiers to form lines of defense. Fortunately, every soldier was well trained, and the cooperation between them was a permanent part of their daily training. Their side was solemnly waiting, but the Red Lotus group was still daydreaming. Little did they know that there was a fierce wolf in front of them waiting to strike and a fierce tiger behind them eyeing them covetously. The vanguard battalion led by Jiang Pingji slowly approached the target. To prevent exposure, the distance between each other was a little long. As soon as the first wave of confrontation between the Red Lotus group and the main army broke out, the vanguard battalion would immediately launch a sneak attack from the rear. Dian Yan gritted his molars nervously. Thick blue veins popped out on his forehead. It was the dead of winter and his face was covered in hot sweat. Jiang Pingji said in a low voice, "Don't be nervous. This is just a small battle. With me here, nothing will go wrong." Dian Yan tried to slow down his breathing and slowly adjust his state of mind. When the cold wind blew, his hot sweat turned into cold sweat. It was so cold that he shivered. On the mountain road, the members of the Red Lotus group could only hear the howling mountain wind and the footsteps of people walking. Occasionally, gravel rolled down, making a rustling sound. No matter how long the road was, there would always be an end, not to mention that the mountain road leading to Fenghu County was not long. The messenger reported, "There's a situation ahead. Thief Lu and his group seem to have discovered the traces of our group." The leader was not surprised. He laughed and scolded, "We're holding torches. If they didn't discover us, they'd be blind. So what if they've put on a battle formation? It's just a last-ditch struggle. Brothers, go. Capture Thief Lu alive. 1,000 taels of silver, countless beauties, whatever you want." As long as they attracted Lu Shi's main firepower, The brothers in Fenghu County would sneak in from the exit of the mountain road and launch a sneak attack on Lu Shi's weaker rear. Then they would surround Thief Lu so that he would not be able to take care of both the front and the back. Wouldn't that be wonderful? However, there was a saying that went, "Dreams are plentiful, but reality is harsh." How could a sinister guy like Qiguan Rang not have a backup plan? Did you see the stone wall he had people pile up? Were you surprised? Were you surprised? Chapter 640. As a non-mainstream streamer, Jiang Pingji's daily live stream was as punctual as if she was clocking in at work. If she suddenly started streaming in the middle of the night one day, there was no doubt that she would stir up some trouble. There was no shortage of night owls with a rich nightlife in the world. Jiang Pingji had just started streaming, and the audience seats were full in less than a second. Zisa Junyan, the streaming room is actually starting in the middle of the night. How rare. Simia Mayawo. As a loyal fan of the streaming room, every time I start streaming in the middle of the night something always happens. This time should be no exception. But where is this place? Why is it so dark? If I hadn't turned on the infrared panoramic view, I wouldn't have been able to see anything. Xiaoye Joa. Looking at the image, it should be the mountain road during the day. Tonight's program is a night attack to outflank the Red Lotus group? Mou's Fong Mei. Dumplings? Dumpling fillings with the flavor of the Red Lotus group? Jiang Pingji didn't explain much. She just briefly introduced the situation. She started an extra live stream tonight not for the audience, but to make use of the camera in the streaming room. As mentioned before, the camera in the streaming room could be rotated without any blind spots. It was positioned directly above Jiang Pingji's head, and the angle of view moved as she moved. In addition, the height and angle of the camera could be adjusted. The captured image could be seen not only by the audience in the streaming room, but also by Jiang Pingji. Using this angle of view, Jiang Pingji could easily control the overall situation and grasp the movements of the Red Lotus group. As for the live stream, that was just incidental. With the camera 100 meters above the ground and the continuous information sent back by the scouts, Jiang Pingji had a rough idea. "My lord, when do we attack?" Dian Yan asked in a low voice, looking eager to try. The axes in his hands were already hungry and thirsty. This time, Jiang Pingji didn't ask him for weapons. Dian Yan could finally kill to his heart's content. Jiang Pingji said, "Wait." Dian Yan was surprised. Wait for what? The Red Lotus group had only dispatched 3,000 troops, but the strength of the Central Army was not as strong as the vanguard. If they delayed for too long, they might be overturned. When they fight with Wen Zheng and attract the firepower of the main force, we will attack from the rear. They will be in a mess. If we attack now, they will react and fight while retreating. If Wen Zheng's side pursues them, it will be difficult for them to maintain their formation, and it will be easy for trouble. If that was the case, the Red Lotus group would be determined to break out of the encirclement. If their attacks were too fierce, they might really be able to escape. The prey that Jiang Pingji set her eyes on always had only one ending. If she let her prey escape, where would she put her dignity as a hunter? Dian Yan nodded. At this moment, Jiang Nongqin had already arranged everything properly and came to report. Jiang Pingji asked her, "Has the wounded been dealt with properly?" Jiang Nongqin replied, "Two of them affected their wounds, causing their wounds to split open. However, the situation is not serious. There are military doctors taking care of them." Most of the military doctors were female soldiers with better medical skills in the female battalion. Due to the influence of the environment, Jiang Pingji did not expand the scale of the women's battalion at will. From the beginning to the end, it was still a battalion. Jiang Pingji had her own reasons for the slow increase in the number of female troops and the lack of large-scale expansion. Firstly, there were too few women applying for the recruitment. This was the most fundamental reason. Secondly, Jiang Pingji was also intentionally controlling the number of people. The female battalion was more focused on quality than quantity. After all, the reproduction of the population required women to give birth. It was impossible to let all women go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. Moreover, not all women were eager to stand out. Women with such a strong desire were often deeply hurt. In fact, most women preferred a stable life and liked to stay at home to support their husbands and raise their children. Everyone had their own aspirations. Jiang Pingji did not force them. Thirdly, although Jiang Pingji was unwilling to think about it, women were indeed not as convenient as men in terms of physiology. For example, menstruation. Marching to war was not child's play. The enemy would not be lenient to you just because you were a woman or because your body was inconvenient. In fact, the enemy would only be crueler. They would take advantage of your weakness to kill you. If one did not pick the soft persimmon to pinch, would they look for those who were difficult to chew? Based on various realities, while Jiang Pingji focused on the development of the female battalion's strength, she also carefully considered other factors. If the female battalion had physiological inconveniences, they could temporarily be transferred to the logistics to deal with the miscellaneous items in the military camp. Those with good medical skills could enter the medical area and take on jobs similar to nurses or doctors to take care of the wounded. It could solve the problems of the female soldiers and reduce the pressure in other areas. Jiang Nongqin managed the female battalion very well and had a good reputation. Regardless of how the outside world viewed the female battalion, at least the soldiers under Jiang Pingji were friendly to the female battalion. Jiang Nongqin's efforts were indispensable for the current development. Order the female battalion to coordinate with the attack and cover the vanguard battalion to clear the way. Chapter 641. The Red Lotus group was completely dumbfounded this time. The people guarding the exit anxiously waited for the fire arrows to appear so that they could attack Thief Lu's army from both sides. However, when they finally rushed over, they discovered that the path in front of them was blocked by piled-up stone walls. Arrows continued to shoot down from above the stone walls. Some members of the Red Lotus group were caught off guard and were pierced by the arrows. Fresh blood filled the air and dyed the yellow-brown ground. Faint shouts of "kill" came from behind the stone wall. The Red Lotus group, who had come to provide support, realized that they had been tricked. Qiguan Rang was calm and collected. He helped Li Yun defend the front line while commanding the archers on the stone wall to resist the strong enemy. Because the mountain path was narrow, Little White's body could not move easily. Therefore Jiang Pingji gave up fighting on horseback. She held her spear and planned to fight on foot. The archers of the vanguard battalion killed a wave of enemies first. When the distance between the two sides narrowed, they drew their swords and engaged in close combat. They had to defeat this wave of enemies before the Red Lotus group broke through the defense of the stone wall. Otherwise, Qiguan Rang's central army would be in danger. During the melee, the crowd was too chaotic. Jiang Pingji quickly disappeared, but those with good eyesight saw her. It was clearly a melee, but she could always find a gap. She either stabbed the enemy's fatal spot with her spear, or crushed the enemy's throat from behind, or stepped on the enemy's shoulder or head and rushed into the enemy's group. Wherever the silver light passed, blood splattered. She had a strong sense of combat. Whether it was an open spear or a hidden arrow, they could not get close to her. Jiang Pingji took a moment to glance. Her long leg kicked a person's heart and she used the force to jump high. She stepped onto the cliff of the mountain path and leaped sideways. At the same time, her spear was not idle. It stabbed, entangled, blocked, pounced and pointed. Cold stars twinkled, silver light flashed, and the snow-white shadow of the spear was accompanied by blood. The Red Lotus group had also discovered such a killer. However, Jiang Pingji's style of using offense as defense was truly frightening. It was not that they did not want to kill Jiang Pingji, but they were afraid of being killed. It seemed that no matter how many people pounced on her, they would eventually lie down, leaving a bloody hole in their bodies. Jiang Pingji charged straight in one direction. Dian Yen, who was behind her, did not know whether to laugh or cry, but he could not allow Jiang Pingji to act recklessly. While paying attention to Jiang Pingji's situation, he led the troops to charge forward and kill the enemy. Jiang Nongqin led the women's battalion and coordinated from the side. At the same time, she blocked the Red Lotus group's retreat. The two sides fought fiercely. Shouts, screams, howls of pain, and the muffled sounds of sharp weapons piercing through flesh. All that was left were broken limbs and wreckage. Almost everyone who was standing had become a soul collector. Their faces, clothes, sleeves, weapons, shoes. There was not a single spot that was not stained with blood. The pungent and sticky smell permeated the silent mountain path. On the other side, the Red Lotus group on the other side of the stone wall also gradually had the intention to retreat. The archers were truly too powerful. Not only were they accurate but their arrows also had a long range. They tried to attack several times but each time they couldn't stand firm. Instead they left behind hundreds of corpses. Under such circumstances, what else could they not understand? They had all fallen into the enemy's trap. General, what should we do now? What should we do? What can I do? The height of the stone wall was not high but for them it was like a natural moat. If they did not care about the losses and forced their way through they could break through, but the losses were too great, and the leader already had the intention to retreat. He took a few deep breaths and looked in the direction of the stone wall with a sinister gaze. He thought for a long time. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Retreat." Retreat? The people around him were stunned. If they retreated, what would happen to their brothers on the other side of the stone wall? If we don't retreat, are we going to continue to court death? Are you blind? This is a trap targeted at us. If we force our way through, we will be courting death. More importantly, the losses had already been incurred. If they continued to attack, the losses would be even greater. What if they were held accountable? To everyone's surprise, the Red Lotus group, who had been summoned by the rocket, attacked several times without any results. They actually left behind hundreds of corpses and retreated. When Qiguanrang heard the news, he was astonished. At the same time, he relaxed his anxious heart. If they continued to attack, the central army would be fighting on both sides, and the pressure on the defense would be great. He was confident that he could persevere, but the number of casualties was hard to say. Now that they had retreated, it meant that they had completely given up on the 3,000 Red Lotus group members who had come to ambush them. He could make dumplings with peace of mind. Before he could send someone to shout the news and strike a blow to the enemy's confidence, a series of shouts came from the front. The enemy has been beheaded. Jiang Pingji rushed all the way from the point where the two armies met to the center of the Red Lotus group, leaving behind countless corpses. Her red clothes and silver armor were dyed the color of blood. It was as if she had been soaked in a pool of blood for a night. Her face was covered in sticky blood. Jiang Pingji rushed toward the enemy's leader. At first she didn't know who the leader was, but he was too stupid. He kept shouting for others to protect him, so Jiang Pingji knew that he was the leader. She used the spear to shake off the guy who was blocking her way. With a flick of her wrist, the spear left her hand and pierced through his throat. Until the last moment, his widened eyes were still filled with panic and disbelief. Dian Yen led his men to attack from the rear. With the coordination of the women's battalion, the long axe danced, cutting melons and vegetables along the way. If Jiang Pingji's killing was considered artistic, then Dian Yan's was only brutal. To quote the words of the livestream viewers, "If I swing my axe, your body may be separated from your family." As for Jiang Nongqin, she still used her usual ruthless methods. Compared to fighting on horseback, she was more suitable for fighting on foot. Jiang Pingji's voice spread throughout the mountain road. The people of the Red Lotus group had long been killed to the point that their morale was wavering. The morale of the army was shaken and there was little will to fight. Coupled with Jiang Pingji's voice, they threw away their helmets and abandoned their armor. They no longer had the will to fight. Once someone chose to surrender to save their life, this depressed atmosphere spread like a virus. With one, there would naturally be a second and a third. These soldiers of the Red Lotus group had no sense of honor, let alone fight to the death. Now that the situation was hopeless, they naturally wouldn't struggle to the death. There was a way out if they surrendered. If they stubbornly resisted, what awaited them would be death. Qiguanrang looked at the battle situation that had been decided and let out a long sigh of relief. Capturing captives and cleaning up the battlefield, Jiang Pingji had delegated these tasks to others. Qiguanrang instructed everyone, tidied up his appearance, and then went to see Jiang Pingji. "My lord." Jiang Pingji glanced at Qiguanrang and said with a smile, "Did the scene just now scare Wenjing?" To put it bluntly, Qiguanrang's main army was the bait to delay Fenghu County. If they weren't careful, they might lose their lives. Qiguanrang said, "What's there to be afraid of in such a small scene?" Even if his life was at stake, Qiguanrang didn't show any anxious emotions. His mental fortitude was excellent. Clean up the battlefield. There's no time for the soldiers to rest and reorganize. We must rush back to Jinmen County as soon as possible. Chapter 642. The sneak attack had failed and they had been surrounded instead. When the news of the Red Lotus Group's defeat reached Fenghu County, the scholar was stunned. A moment ago he had been happily waiting for his subordinates to escort Lu Shi over. In the next second he had lost his soul. "What did you say?" The scholar strode forward and grabbed the messenger's collar. His face was ferocious and his eyes were wide open. Anger burned in his chest. He felt that he must have heard wrong or that the messenger had given the wrong information. How could they have been defeated? The messenger had difficulty breathing as he was lifted by the collar. He was also frightened by the scholar. Who would have thought that the usually gentle and thin military counselor could be so terrifying when he was angry? However, he still had to say what needed to be said. He stammered and repeated the news. Not only did the 3,000 troops sent by the Red Lotus Group fail to capture Lu Shi, but they were also surrounded on the mountain road and annihilated. The scholar was so angry that he clenched his teeth. He was so angry and resentful that he threw the messenger to the ground. Something was wrong. The scholar was about to gather his troops to get back at them when he suddenly remembered something. Wait. Although Lu Shi's troops are strong and can indeed defeat our 3,000 valiant generals, what about the people outside? If the troops outside had rushed into the mountain road to fight, they would not have been defeated like this. The messenger's face turned pale. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He knelt on the ground and crawled, not daring to get up. Seeing this, the scholar knew that there was an inside story. The audacious messenger had concealed the information. He scolded him sternly, "Tell me quickly what happened. If there is even half a word of falsehood, the gods will punish you and your entire clan will be annihilated." The messenger was so scared that he could not stop trembling. He spat out everything. "Military counselor, Lu Shi is really treacherous. It's not that we didn't go to rescue him." The messenger was so scared that he confessed the information that he had concealed without hesitation. However, the content of the information had been edited. Although the scholar did not have much knowledge, he was very cruel and jealous. If he knew the truth, many people would have to bear the consequences. They had no choice but to think of ways to push the blame onto Jiang Pingji to lessen their own responsibilities. If the scholar was angry, he would vent his anger on Jiang Pingji. Small fries like them would be spared. After the general discovered the abnormality, he led his troops into the mountain path to provide assistance. How could he have known that traitor Lu was so cunning? He had already blocked that part of the mountain path and sent hundreds of archers to stand by on the stone wall. The general tried to attack several times. Hundreds of his brothers died, but they still couldn't shake the Lu clan's defense line. At this moment, the brothers inside could no longer hold on. For the sake of the other brothers, the general had no choice but to fall back. Otherwise, he wouldn't have abandoned his brothers so easily. "Counselor, please understand, you must avenge your brothers." Hearing this explanation, the scholar was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. Of course, that wasn't the only thing that had infuriated him. The blow that had caused the scholar to ascend to the heavens hadn't ended just yet. The scholar used all his strength to suppress his anger. His mind was blank and he couldn't think of any countermeasure to get back at him. Obviously, Thief Lu's deployment should have seen through their tricks, and the other party was already on guard. If they used a sneak attack again, it was destined to be ineffective. As he thought about it, a small leader staggered in from outside and shouted, "Counselor, bad news." "What bad news?" "I'm fine." The scholar frowned. His already chaotic heart was even more irritated by this person's interruption, like a ball of yarn that couldn't be sorted out. He said, "Tell me what happened. If it's not important, I'll definitely punish you." The small leader had run all the way here and was already panting from exhaustion and sweating profusely. Hearing the scholar's words, he suddenly had the urge to cry but had no tears. He said uncomfortably, "Counselor, Jinmen district has been lost." Everyone present was dumbfounded. The scholar almost thought that he was hallucinating. "What did you say was lost?" The small leader caught his breath and said in tears, "Jinmen district has been captured by Thief Lu." The scholar's eyelids twitched uncontrollably and he gradually panicked. However, he still said resolutely, "That's impossible. Thief Lu was almost right under our noses. How could he have the manpower to attack Jinmen district? Lying about military intelligence, do you know your crime?" The small leader was burning with anxiety. He said, "It's true. Yesterday morning, Thief Lu suddenly led troops to attack Jinmen district. Not long after he lost. Countless brothers were killed and captured. If this lowly one says anything false, let the gods strike this lowly one to death. Jinmen district was really lost? The scholar's heart sank to the bottom of a lake. His hands and feet were cold and he was so shocked that he forgot how to breathe. Impossible, this is impossible. Thief Lu's target was clearly Fenghu district. He had been sending scouts to probe. How could he have extra manpower to go to Jinmen district? When did he go? If Jinmen district was captured by Thief Lu, how could he have had enough troops to surround and ambush them in the middle of the night? The scholar couldn't figure out the key point. There was no time at all. Either Thief Lu had descended from the heavens and created something out of nothing, like an immortal technique like casting beans to form soldiers. That was how he won. Or Lu Shi had brought more than 10,000 troops with him. There must have been other troops that had been secretly hidden. The scholar was shocked out of his wits by the news one after another. For a moment he didn't suspect Enchui. Regardless of whether the scholar suspected or not, Enchui, the ruthless and evil guy, had stirred up a wave of trouble. Military counselor, what should we do now? The group of subordinates looked at each other. The scholar shuddered violently. With a cold expression he said, gather the troops and return to Jinmen district. Thief Lu's main force is still here. If we take the official road we can definitely reach Jinmen district before Thief Lu. There are still our people and believers in Jinmen district. We can take it down if we work together. It was rare for the scholar to be smart for once. If everything went according to his plan and they were fast enough, they might be able to take back Jinmen district. After all, the Red Lotus group had been operating in Jinmen district for a long time. Many people hated them to the bone, but there were also many people who were deeply bewitched. They believed in the gods in their hearts and worshipped them every day. Jiang Pingji had just taken over Jinmen district. There were not many troops left behind and her power was unstable. As long as the Red Lotus group reached Jinmen district before her, it would be hard to tell who would win or lose. However, the scholar's opponent was Jiang Pingji, who was definitely a person of action. She was known as the master of rhythm on the battlefield. Did he want to compete with her in speed? Hehe. On the other side, Jiang Pingji rushed back with her troops. Su Ku was her personal accountant, private warehouse manager, and invisible chief strategist. His tacit understanding with Jiang Pingji was not just for show. The siege equipment arrived at Jinmen district almost at the same time as her. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.